Chapter 1138. Seeing the third prince's hesitant look, Lin Yuan did not see any disappointment in his eyes, as if everything was within his expectations. Thus he turned around and looked at Yu Jiang. He was silent for a moment before he said, "As for why you came to the northern region to look for me, I'm also aware of it. I only have one response to this. Even if you're dreaming, you should have a sense of propriety." Yu Jiang narrowed his eyes slightly. Although he did not speak, the green snake hanging by his ear was constantly twisting and baring its teeth at Lin Yuan, as if it was ready to bite Lin Yuan at any time and pour deadly venom into Lin Yuan's body. Yu Jiang and Lin Yuan looked at each other for a moment. Suddenly, his face changed and he shouted, "Qi!" As his voice fell, layers of shadows appeared behind him. The shadows of flowers, birds, fish, insects, mountains and rivers appeared like a mirage, instantly covering the original appearance of this world. 24 heavens. I was wondering why Yu Jiang did not go with Hamba, but went with Hong Yun. It turned out that he had already betrayed the human race and cultivated the Western method. Shangqing Tianzuan, who was secretly watching the battle, could not help but sneer when he saw Yu Jiang make a move. At the same time, his body emitted endless killing intent. During the investiture of the gods, the cause was that the human king DXN did not respect the mandate of heaven and tried to claim the title of human king and establish the human Tao. This forced Hong Jun to be furious and set off the cultivation tribulation. He sent Jiang Zia, a disciple of the Jie order, down the mountain with the investiture of the gods and dragged DXN, who had not yet matured, into the cultivation tribulation. If it was delayed for a while, once the human Tao was established, the three sovereigns who were sealed in the fire cloud cave would definitely abolish their position as heavenly sage and lead the human Tao sage. In that cultivation tribulation, although there was an element of acting, who had seen acting that caused one to lose one's fortune? Tong Tian's sect leader was the most straightforward one among the 6 saints. Although he was not from the human tribe, nor was he the sect leader of the Ren sect like the Grand Elder, he still led his disciples to leave the Aquamarine Palace out of malice toward Hong Jun. He agreed to Xin Gongbao's request and led his sect into the calamity. Tong Tian did not have a good impression of the human race. However, since the human race had rebelled against Hong Jun, they were his comrades. The 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors of the human race and the Empress Pingxin of the Netherworld were all good friends of Tong Tian. Tong Tian had heard of Yu Jiang's name before. After all, he was the grandson of the Yellow Emperor and the right-hand man of the human king Xuanxu. He was also one of the comrades in arms who fought against Hong Jun. Therefore he was not willing to intervene in the battle between Lin Yuan and Yu Jiang. But now Yu Jiang had summoned the shadows of the 24 heavens. It immediately reminded him of the shameless Western duo in the investiture of the gods. Shangqing Tianzuan rolled up his sleeves. His gaze was gloomy and cold. The 4 flying swords revolved around him as he stared coldly at Yu Jiang. He planned to give him a ruthless blow when he was caught off guard. Motherf *Ker? Lin Yuan's expression changed. He did not have time to think. He opened his mouth and spat out a green light. It was the willow branch bestowed by the old ancestor Yang Mei. He was not worried that he was not Yu Jiang's opponent. He had no idea whether Yu Jiang cultivated the righteous path of the human world or the Western Buddhism. However, before the battle Yu Jiang could ignore it. But as the god of the northern frontier, he had to consider the people of the northern frontier under his rule. Behind him was the capital of the northern frontier, Shunning City. He would definitely not be able to withstand the power of the 24 heavens. However, if he dodged, Shunning City would suffer a calamity. The willow branch shot out like a celestial sword and slammed into the 24 heavens, shattering them into pieces. Although Yu Jiang cultivated the Western Dharma, in the end this was the Qianwu world. He could not display his original strength. Even the 24 heavens that he summoned had long been incorporated into the chaotic world by the Western sect. He had only summoned an afterimage. It was indeed a supreme power. However, compared to the willow branch that was cut off by the old ancestor Yang Mei's main body, it was still more than 1 level inferior. Yu Jiang's attack did not succeed. A look of surprise appeared on his face. However, he was after all a mighty person who had been in battle for a long time. He did not react. He casually pushed, and the remaining power of the 24 heavens phantoms once again smashed towards Lin Yuan. He did not believe that although Lin Yuan had a supreme treasure on him, he could still activate it without limit. Boom. A loud sound spread. The broken 24 heavens phantoms smashed down. Although Lin Yuan did not have time to call back the willow branch, he summoned his limitless demon domain. The 2 world phantoms collided for a moment and dissipated. Lin Yuan's face was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. Previously he summoned the limitless demon domain to subdue Mosquito Daoran. In the end, his cultivation was ruined by Mosquito Doran's recitation of Tao Te Ching. In these 3 months he had just reformed the limitless demon domain. He did not expect that after being touched by Jianghu, the fragile limitless demon domain would collapse again. If it was not for the two world phantoms clashing, the aftershock of this collision would have swept across tens of thousands of miles. Rain come. After Lin Yuan died in anger. In an instant the sky changed color. Dark clouds condensed out of thin air. It was as if the heavenly river had been overturned. Shangqing Tianzuan, who was about to make a move, slightly bowed. He pondered for a moment and waved his hand. The 4 flying swords hid in his sleeves. He calmly stared at the area where Lin Yuan and Yu Jiang were fighting. He knew that this brat was not honest. Last time when he dealt with Mosquito Daoran, he did not use his full strength at all. Although both sides were comrades in arms, against Hongjun, there was no fairy tale in the adult world. There was only talk of benefits. The secret of the Jianghu world's nurturing was very likely to be a supreme treasure. Although all things in the world reinforced and restrained each other, it did not make sense that another world that was not related to the Great Desolate Age would specially nurture a supreme treasure that could kill Hongjun. Therefore, this supreme treasure was most likely an existence more terrifying than the Pangu Banner or the Demon Refining Gourd. It was terrifying to the extent that it could kill an almighty at Hongjuan's level. No matter who this supreme treasure landed in, it would be a huge threat. Of course, other than himself. Therefore Lin Yuan, Shangqing Tianzuan, Taoist Red Cloud, and even those hidden almighties, none of them wanted to give in. To reveal one's trump card in front of a competitor, if that was not a fool, what was? Even for Shangqing Tianzuan, the reason why he concealed the identity of Mosquito Daoran was because he wanted to borrow Mosquito Doran's hands to test how capable the Black Jiao was and whether he was qualified to compete with him in Red Cloud for that supreme treasure. He did not expect that this brat actually dared to conceal his identity when facing an existence at the level of Mosquito Daoran. Under the pouring rain, ordinary people could not even open their eyes. However, Lin Yuan's blue and white eyes were filled with endless killing intent. But Yu Jiang gave a cold laugh and said mockingly, "I've seen many of the dragon race's tricks of moving clouds and summoning rain. It's just a bluff. Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Lin Yuan did not continue the conversation. His face was cold and there was a rumbling sound of thunder behind him. Chapter 1139. The blue thunder and lightning roared and wrapped around Lin Yuan's body like a layer of armor. He was like an unruly demon king who was roaring with his head raised, disrespecting the heavens and disrespecting the earth. Suddenly, an aura of supremacy in the 4 seas and the universe exploded. Although Yu Jiang said that he wasn't afraid, he still clasped his hands together under the roar of thunder. His body expanded, revealing his golden body with golden Buddhist light circulating around him. "You think you're qualified to shout at this king?" Lin Yuan was high up in the sky, hiding his body in a thundercloud, but his voice became louder and louder. At this moment the entire northern region, whether mortals or cultivators, could not help but look at the thundercloud above Shining City, especially some young cultivators who could not help showing a yearning look in their eyes. A real man standing in the world should be like this. The Black Jiao of the northern frontier had never lost a battle since he left the Hengduan Mountains. Even though the Black Jiao rarely fought now, his deeds of killing 2 demon kings were still vivid in their minds. Even the self-proclaimed ruler of the Jianghu world, the protector of the Jianghu world, couldn't help showing a difficult expression when faced with some matters involving the northern frontier. He didn't want to easily provoke the Black Jiao. Although Yu Jiang's expression didn't change and even under the cover of the Buddhist light, he could vaguely see mercy. However, seeing that Lin Yuan wasn't afraid at all and was determined to fight to the death, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. This time he came to the northern frontier with the intention of befriending Lin Yuan and leaving behind a portion of the faith. After accumulating a certain amount of faith, he might not be able to advance further, but at least in the future, he would be able to guarantee that he would be in the first or second echelon. At that time, whether he fought with others to become the ruler of the world or became a subordinate in name, he could do whatever he wanted. But after all, he was the god of the North Sea. In the untainted world, although he assisted Zhuanshu, he was absolutely a supreme existence in his own territory. And in the North Sea, the only ones qualified to compete with him for hegemony were the North Sea dragon race. If the unhappiness between his father and the dragon race of the East Sea was taken into account, it wouldn't be a problem to say that the 2 sides were mortal enemies. So when he saw Lin Yuan, he couldn't help but feel a touch of hostility. When he recovered, he was already fighting with Lin Yuan. Originally it was not a big deal. After all, Lin Yuan was just a flood dragon in his eyes. According to the strength division of the untainted world, the flood dragon may be regarded as a great demon in the mortal world, but it was not very powerful. Some successful practitioners could subdue the flood dragon. For other species in the untainted land, the flood dragon was even a bloody meal. Even the dragon tribe itself was not very willing to accept the flood dragon. After all, although the flood dragon had the word dragon in its name, it was very different from the real dragon. It was only a little stronger than monsters such as the alligator. But now, it seemed that the black Jiao of the northern frontier was not so easy to deal with, especially the ball of green light that broke his 24 celestial phantoms. He was still unable to recognize what it was, but based on that instant of collision he was able to determine that it was definitely an item at the level of a natural spirit treasure. This black Jiao was unknown in the untainted world, but it had a strong fighting strength that didn't match that of a flood dragon. In addition, it had a supreme treasure in its hand. Anyone could see that this black Jiao's background was not simple. Black Jiao. Yu Jiang took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed his rage and surprise. He said in a low voice, "Although this god doesn't know which era you came from, you should know this god's identity, right? Moreover, with your eyes, can't you see which sect I'm practicing? You should be grateful that I'm discussing with you properly. How dare you try to disobey me? You deserve to die." Hearing this, Shangqing Celestial Lord, who was watching the battle, curled his lips and his face was full of disdain. Shaking people and showing off their backgrounds were already the traditional skills of the Western sect. If one were to trace back, they would have already started doing such things before the Western sect's second Shur became a saint. If one were to carefully think about it, these two people would not do anything related to people at all. In the beginning, there was no place for the Western sect's Urshi among the 6 heavenly sages. In the end, these two people took advantage of Hong Yun, who had to maintain the image of a nice guy, and cheated Hong Yun of his Hong Meng immortal vapor. After taking away one place to become a sage, they felt that it was not enough, so they turned around and went to find the demon master, Kunpeng. When facing Hong Yun, they had to pretend that Hong Yun was the disciple of Hong Jun. But when facing the demon master, Kunpeng, who was the descendant of the primordial phoenix, they were shameless. They joined forces to attack him and took away his Hong Meng immortal vapor. The most amazing thing was that these two people left Kunpeng alive and didn't kill him directly, which brought a fatal disaster to Hong Yun. After doing these things and obtaining the Hong Meng immortal vapor, could one become a sage? That was obviously not enough, because if one wanted to become a sage, one had to have enough strength or use the power of merit to make up for it. Even the great merit of the 3 sovereigns only took away one heavenly path sage's position. From this, one could see how much power of merit was needed when one's strength was not enough. What the Western sect's Urshi did next was amazing. The two of them slapped their foreheads and made 48 great wishes. They established the Western sect and attracted a huge amount of power of merit to help them become sages. It sounded normal, right? But in reality, the Western sect's Urshi didn't do those 48 great wishes at all, or rather they just did it on the surface. As for the outcome, one would know by looking at what the Western sect did. The so-called sages were not tainted by karma. It didn't mean that after becoming a sage they would be free from karma. But for sages they had supreme mana and endless lifespan. No matter what kind of karma they were tainted with, they only needed to do it slowly and pay it back slowly. What would happen if they didn't do it? It was also very simple, because sages themselves were immortal existences, especially sages of the Great Path. Even if they died, they could be reborn from the origin of the Great Path. Therefore, if sages were tainted with karma and didn't pay it back and let the power of karma explode, they would at most be unlucky for a period of time. The real disaster would be faced by their disciples. If they were careless, the entire sect would be overturned. Otherwise, the Western sect's Urshi wouldn't have been so active in the investiture of the gods. The Western sect had also been crazily recruiting believers, with the purpose of making the Western sect stronger. As long as there were more people, even if the power of karma exploded, everyone wouldn't die together. How many people who believed in Buddhism suffered miserably? The Buddha annihilation movement wasn't just once or twice. Chapter 1140. The fundamental reason was that the 2 Buddhas of the Western sect had made great vows to become saints of the heavenly Tao. However, these 2 fellows were not moral role models. They could just casually make great vows. Wouldn't it be better for them to let their disciples face calamities and repay karma? Especially later on, the Western sect was even more extreme. Chanting the name of Buddha would allow one to obtain merit. Every time one chanted it, they would obtain merit. The most excessive thing was that even chanting the name of Buddha had standards. According to the records in the Buddhist scriptures, the better the prayer beads and Buddha statues one bought, the more merit one would obtain from chanting the name of Buddha. Wasn't this obviously a scam? Putting aside the matter of the fake monks amassing wealth, just the matter of obtaining merit, how could there be such a good thing in the world? If merit was so easy to obtain, then what was the purpose of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors doing everything for the prosperity of the human race? They were dumber than you. Didn't they know that chanting the name of Buddha would allow them to obtain merit? Chanting the name of Buddha was actually helping others share the burden of disaster. Apart from the stories that were made up to deceive people, these innocent believers rarely had good endings. It was the norm for their families to be destroyed. In fact, in some movies and TV series, it was very common for criminals to kill the believers who chanted the name of Buddha and then stain the Buddha statue with blood. The criminals then walked away. This Jianghu, Shangqing Tianzuan could not tell how well he had learned the methods of the Western sect. However, he was very familiar with the methods of the Western sect. He had the demeanor of a grand master. At the same time, Hamba, who was also watching the battle, reached out his hand to support his forehead. The power of qi and blood in his body kept on surging. His lips opened and closed, but he could not make a sound for a long time. However, if one knew how to read lips, they could easily read 4 words: family misfortune. As for the furious Lin Yuan, he could not help but be slightly stunned. At this time he really could not find any words to describe Yu Jiang. How awesome, brother. In his previous life, Lin Yuan wasn't considered to be the son of an aristocratic family. He could only say that his family's environment was not bad, and his own ability was not bad. After taking over his family's business, his social status began to rise. He had seen a lot of famous people in the business world and influential bigwigs. Due to his age, he had also come into contact with a lot of second-generation heirs. Compared to those second-generation heirs in urban novels who would clamor until their families were destroyed for the sake of a woman or a bit of face, the second-generation heirs had all received elite education. Even if there weren't many of them who were extremely shrewd at a young age, they were still able to talk well and advance and retreat naturally. To them, they didn't care about background or wealth. They only cared about ability and structure. Not to mention losing a little face. As long as you could bring value to them, it wouldn't be a problem for them to stretch their faces out for you to slap. However, Lin Yuan did not expect that the first time he met someone with cerebral palsy, he would turn out to be a mythical figure. Big brother, don't you know where you are when you speak? What was your attitude before? You were arrogant and contemptuous, and you even attacked when you said you wanted to. Now that you found out that there was a problem, you want to use your background to suppress people? Your F***king trick might not even work in the mortal world, let alone in the cultivation world. What kind of place was the cultivation world? It was a place where the law of the jungle was played out in blood. If you don't eat people, people will eat you. If you want to live forever and be strong, you have to start fighting with your life every time you open your eyes. Background? That thing was only useful when you were chatting. If there was a conflict of interest, would people dump you? I'm a ruthless person who will fight with Hongjun sooner or later. Even if the Western second sure came, I would still fight, let alone someone with your identity? Before Lin Yuan could answer, there were already people who couldn't hold back anymore. In the distance, 3 conveyance lights came together, and they didn't reveal themselves until they were near Shunning City. An old Taoist in a brown Taoist robe rode a green ox in the air. His hair and beard were pale and his skin was wrinkled and ugly. It was almost impossible to recognize his original appearance. The momentum of his body was also looming. Sometimes he looked like a mortal without cultivation, and sometimes he was unfathomable, as if he could destroy the world at any time. A handsome middle-aged scholar with a jade-like face, wearing an emerald green robe, walked toward Shunning City with his hands behind his back, as if he was taking a stroll in a courtyard. However, every step he took, he crossed at least 1,000 feet, and ink-colored characters flashed around him from time to time. Just by looking at him, one would feel that a scholar should have such a temperament. It was a young monk wearing a moon-white monk robe. In terms of appearance alone, he was even more handsome than the middle-aged scholar. His red lips and white teeth made people unable to help but feel tender affection for him. Especially his clear black and white eyes, which seemed to contain all the truth of the world. No matter how time passed, how the seas dried up and the rocks rotted, it was not enough to cause the slightest ripple in his eyes. Sure. Tao. Ru. The gurus of the 3 families gathered at the northern frontier. Not only did these 3 people look extraordinary, but any one of them could be a powerful figure who could suppress an era. The old Taoist was Buxingzhou, the Immortal Lord. He joined the Yingtian Temple of the Myriad Swords dynasty 3,500 years ago, but he didn't make any progress for 30 years. However, he comprehended Tao overnight and the whole world knew about it. Since then, the Yingtian Temple jumped from a third-rate school to a super first-rate school. Even if there were no successors, no one could shake their position. Even if they met a mighty figure like Lei Qiuxing, the Yingtian Temple, which was built on the side of the imperial capital, could only adopt the strategy of lying on the side of the bed and letting others sleep soundly. The deeds of the middle-aged scholar in his early years could no longer be investigated. It was possible to say that he was from any dynasty. During the period from 4,000 to 3,500 years ago, the middle-aged scholar's shadow was behind the power changes of the 7 dynasties. Nowadays, when the Confucian cultivators saw him, they had to respectfully call him patriarch, and his title was like thunder to the ears. Song Xuebua, the imperial tutor of the 7 dynasties, was also the undisputed #1 expert of the Buxing continent. However, the two of them had never fought before, so it was still a mystery as to who was stronger. It was also a topic that the Taoist sect and the Confucian sect often discussed and cursed each other. As for the white-robed monk, he was known as the immovable wisdom king, Kongxiang, the godly monk. 7,000 years ago, a godly monk appeared in the world. Therefore, in the history that swept across the Jianghu world, Kongxiang was not the most powerful person in Buddhism. However, 100 years ago, Kongxiang came out of seclusion at Mount Shaoyi of the Chuyan dynasty and wiped out the southern wasteland demon range. Even the demon venerable of the southern wasteland was afraid of him and didn't dare to confront him directly. Otherwise, the Chuyan dynasty would have been nibbled into an empty shell by the southern wasteland demon range. Looking back, Kongxiang could be considered the most powerful person who suppressed an era for the shortest time, because a few years ago, Black Jiao appeared and took over the title of era-suppressing monster in less than 3 years. Chapter 1141. This wave is a grudge game. The enmity between Buxingzhou and Song Xuebua had been discussed by people for 4,000 years. Although the two kings didn't meet, it involved the conflict between the Taoist schools and the Confucian schools. Even if they didn't meet, once they did meet, there would be a world-shaking battle. Although Kongxiang's reputation was not resounding, he was still an expert who had suppressed the world for 97 years. There were grudges between him and Lin Yuan. If not for the appearance of the Black Jiao in the northern frontier, Kongxiang would still be the #1 expert in the world, spreading the teachings of the Cloud Empire. But now, when the name Kongxiang was mentioned by low-level cultivators and demonic beasts, they would all be shocked. But in the eyes of the guardians of the Heavenly Gate, Kongxiang was simply a joke. Even Song Xuebua, the ruthless person who had stirred up the 7 great empires, had suppressed the world for 500 years before being surpassed by Buxingzhou. Looking at Kongxiang, he had suppressed the world for 97 years. Even a generation of mortals could not be sent away. After all, the spirit qi in the Jianghu world was abundant. Mortals could easily live up to 100 years. If they cultivated a few martial arts, they could live up to 150 years. Fortunately, there was no such thing as entertainment reporters in Jianghu world. Otherwise, if news of these 3 people appearing in the northern region were to spread, even if the 3 of them did nothing, the entertainment reporters would still be able to earn a lot of money. Moreover, what was going on in the northern frontier? They were fighting. Out of the blue, 3 peerless experts suddenly appeared. If you said that the 3 of them were just passing by, even an idiot would not believe it. Lin Yuan and Yu Jiang did not speak. Even if Yu Jiang acted a little retarded, he had actually seen the world. The current atmosphere was so tense that even the cultivators in the northern frontier had to hold their breaths, afraid that the 2 experts who were fighting would take their anger out on them. Not to mention 3 almighty experts who came from other places and whose cultivation was not any weaker than them. This clearly showed that they did not come with good intentions. Kill demons. Buxingzhou said indifferently. Subdue demons. Kongxiang's face was filled with pity. For the sake of the people. Then came Song Xuebua's gentle voice. Cultivation was indeed a very mystical thing. In fact, when these 3 people spoke, they didn't have any expressions or emotions, but people could feel different temperaments from them. For example, Buxingzhou's Tao nature, Song Xuebua's scholarly elegance, and Kongxiang's Tao of compassion. However, after the 3 of them finished speaking, the pressure immediately shifted to Lin Yuan. Regardless of whether he was a demon or a devil, it was actually very vague. However, it was very clear that Lin Yuan could also be classified as a type of demon. Jianghu, which was clearly different from humans, could also be classified as a type of demon. As for Song Shuebua, he was much more straightforward. His words of establishing a life for the people clearly showed that he was dissatisfied with the rule of the northern frontier. However, that was normal. Although the martial heaven world's Confucian sect was far inferior to the chaos world's Confucian sect, there were still some principles that could be passed down from generation to generation. For example, establish a heart for heaven and earth, establish life for the people, inherit the lost techniques of the past sages, establish peace for all ages. As for the Confucian sect, it had always liked to use moral coercion and double standards. That was especially true of the Confucian sect of the Tang and Song dynasties. They had shouted the slogan of upholding the heavens, extinguishing human desires. However, they had forcibly used the thinking of the Confucian ancestors to compare with others. On the other hand, they only required others to be saints, but they themselves had never been saints. What aristocratic families were supposed to do, these people who boasted that they had read the sages' books hadn't missed a single one. However, Lin Yuan didn't dislike this kind of Confucian sect. At most, they would distort the words of Kong and Meng, two sages. They would remove the latter part of the sentence, repay evil with good, how should one repay good? And force others to do it. However, the Confucian sect of the past had focused on accepting the mandate of the heavens or the authority of the gods. They were crazily reversing history, wishing they could return to the era of the Zhou dynasty and trample the hard work of successive generations of human kings beneath their feet. The martial heaven world was an incomplete world. Naturally, its struggles weren't that intense. The Confucian sect also didn't pay attention to that. However, this imperial tutor of the seven dynasties was clearly unhappy that Lin Yuan was the true ruler of the northern frontier. This time he had come to the northern frontier specifically to cause trouble for Lin Yuan. Hidden within the thunder clouds, Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. He sneered, "All of you normally don't show your strength, but now you've all jumped out. What, do you think I don't know how to breathe? Or are you saying that I've already lost so you can hit me while I'm down?" 3 experts whose realms had reached the limit of the martial heaven world, as well as the Almighty from the Yuan wilderness, were placed in front of Lin Yuan. Practically everyone believed that the northern frontier's Dragon King, who had been invincible since he had been born, had already lost. After a moment, 2 more streaks of light appeared. Cyan-robed evil spirit Gudu Ming was a top-notch assassin from the Azure River Empire. He always wore a demonic beast mask that didn't resemble anything. Ever since he had made his debut, he had lived for more than 300 years. There were 3 things he wouldn't kill. He wouldn't kill the weak, he wouldn't kill the old, he wouldn't kill the women and children. However, other than these 3 things, everyone who was targeted by Gudu Ming, regardless of their realm or status, would die. Demon Master Liang Meng Wei Li was also from the Azure River Empire. However, he wasn't an assassin. Instead, he was from a proper sect. He was the sect leader of the Heaven Extermination Sect, a first-rate sect in the Azure River Empire. It was the largest demonic sect in the Azure River Empire. However, he was different from the demonic disciples who cooperated with the Sky Demon. Although Wei Li cultivated demonic techniques, he fought with the righteous path, which was a little similar to the Azura path. At the same time, he was also a sect that ordinary people whose aptitude wasn't recognized by ordinary sects but who wished to cultivate yearned to join. However, the days of the Heaven Extermination Sect weren't too good. Just like the name of the sect, this group of people specialized in going against the guardians of the Heavenly Gate. Why are all the Tom, Dick, and Harry jumping out these days? Wei Li stared fiercely at the 3 people who had appeared before him and said in a disdainful tone. Although Gudu Ming didn't say anything, he unsheathed his sword and pointed it at Buxing Zhou and the other 2. His killing intent was biting cold. Obviously, these 2 peak corrupt Dao experts from the Azure River Empire weren't on the same side as the 3 peak corrupt Dao experts who had come on behalf of Shi Daoru. It was even to the extent that these 2 peak corrupt Dao experts had appeared here just to ambush these 3 peak corrupt Dao experts. Another 2 whistles sounded. Inari god Kagura and war god Batu appeared one by one outside Shunning City. Their eyes were cold as they looked at Yu Jiang. "Fiske?" Lin Yuan suddenly sneered. He squinted his eyes and said, 5 against 4. It seems like some people can't bully us with numbers. Chapter 1142. Buxing Zhou and the other 2 had made an appointment to go to the north this time because they had been approached by some big shot and received a reward in advance that they didn't want to refuse, but also didn't dare to refuse. The 3 of them had been hiding in the northern frontier for a while and hadn't found a chance to make a move. After all, the Black Jiao's invincible aura was a huge deterrent to them. They couldn't forget the scene of the Black Jiao killing the two Archfiend Kings even if they wanted to. They originally thought that they wouldn't be able to get anything good out of this trip to the northern frontier and were prepared to take out all their resources to fight the Black Jiao head-on. However, they didn't expect that an unknown expert would suddenly appear to fight the Black Jiao. That was why they couldn't wait to jump out. In the end, the Black Jiao actually invited help in advance. Even if the three of them were called era suppressors, it was just people giving them face. The real big shots had always been hidden from the world. Compared to the so-called fame, they cared more about their own benefits. Therefore, the famous didn't necessarily mean that they were invincible. If you really wanted to judge whether someone was strong or not, you had to look at what they had done. Needless to say, Du Gumming was the #1 assassin in the world. Those experts who were known as the era suppressors had more than one fallen by Du Gumming's hands. In the assassin industry, Du Gumming had always been respected as the ancestor. If the three of them were to be targeted by Du Gumming alone, their chances of survival would probably not exceed 30%. As for Wei Li, he was even more terrifying. Only cultivators and mortals below the void netherworld realm would feel that the Seven Empires were unshakable existences. Even a second-rate sect was a colossal existence to cultivators at this level. However, cultivators and Yao beasts above the void netherworld realm all knew that the strength of those clans and sects was not purely based on their foundation. It also depended on whether or not they had a big shot behind them. For example, the Qiao family on the northern frontier was a family that had existed for 1,000 years. However, in Lin Yuan's hands they were like a child's toy. That was because the Qiao family seemed powerful, but they didn't have a single cultivator above the void realm. This was why Lin Yuan didn't show any mercy when dealing with the traitorous Qiao family. Traitors, she hated traitors the most in her life. As for the big shots of the world, they were the true rulers of the Heaven Martial World, the protectors of the Heaven Gate. In the Heaven Martial World, there were many people who dared to go against the Heaven Martial World, but those who survived could be counted with one's fingers. For example, Lei Qiuxing could be said to be a bloody example. He had only disobeyed the orders of the protectors of the Heaven Gate, and he hadn't even offended the upper echelons, but it had caused the four great powers to join hands to encircle and annihilate the Xinwu dynasty. If he had offended the true upper echelons, they could single-handedly flatten the Xinwu dynasty. Shadow Demon Su Yin, Northern Frontier Black Jiao, Qingjiang Wei Li. In the entire world, only these three dared to humiliate the protectors of the Heaven Gate. Furthermore, they could still live well after doing so. Thus, when Wei Li opened his mouth to curse, Bu Xingzhou and the other two didn't even dare to speak up. The only thing they were puzzled about was why Wei Li and Du Gumming would appear in the northern frontier. Furthermore, why did they have to support the Black Jiao? Lin Yuan smiled but didn't say anything. With the territory model coupled with the Eye of God, other than the third prince who had suddenly appeared in Shunning City under the care of Yu Jiang, Bu Xingzhou and the other two had nowhere to hide. As mentioned before, the northern frontier was currently standing on a dividing line. If the plan was carried out smoothly, swallowing the other empires and unifying the Heaven Martial continent would be just around the corner. However, if the plan wasn't carried out smoothly, the great situation of the northern frontier would be ruined in one of the following battles. Thus, Lin Yuan couldn't help but be sensitive. Towards the three peak experts who had suddenly appeared, he naturally took care of them. Even the peddlers near the inn where the three were staying were secretly changed to people from the Association of the Demon Emperor. As expected, wasn't this jumping the other way round? Although Lin Yuan was confident in his own strength, he wouldn't gamble with the foundation of the northern frontier. Although the appearance of Yu Jiang had surprised him, the situation was still within his control. Du Gumming wasn't difficult to invite. As long as he could find his whereabouts and promise him the rewards he wanted, a peak expert directly joined the camp of the northern frontier. Other than the population base, the conditions of the northern frontier were actually much better than the other empires. This time, in order to invite Du Gumming, Lin Yuan was even more ruthless. He suspended all the projects that could be suspended and used a shocking amount of resources to hire this peak assassin. As for Wei Li, that was an unexpected surprise. This was because in the original plan Lin Yuan, Kagura, Batu and Du Gumming would fight against Bu Xingzhou and the other two. Unexpectedly, Wei Li was actually able to maintain the attitude of going against the Heavenly Gate Protector and directly followed Du Gumming to the northern frontier. Wei Li didn't mention anything about rewards. It was probably due to the personality of the Demon Dao. In short, there was a saying, "No amount of gold can buy my happiness." This time, Wei Li's goal in coming to the northern frontier was to make the Heavenly Gate Protector unhappy. If the Heavenly Gate Protector was unhappy, he would be happy. I will delay the Black Jiao. The three of you quickly killed Du Gumming and Wei Li. Bu Xingzhou's old face that was like a withered tree bark turned serious. His right hand shook slightly and a pitch-black wooden stick was thrown out. Some sharp-eyed cultivators instantly exclaimed, "Lightning Severing Branch. The sect treasure of Yingtian Temple." Legend had it that Yingtian Temple was actually called Defying Tian Temple a few thousand years ago. This black wooden stick was the treasure that the founder of the sect had once comprehended Tao on the Endless Sea. In the end, he attracted the heavenly punishment Lightning Tribulation. He casually plucked a peach tree to face the heavenly punishment Lightning Tribulation. After 3 days, the founder stepped into the state above the void realm. His clothes were spotless. Only the peach tree that he plucked was struck into a pitch-black wooden stick by the heavenly punishment Lightning Tribulation and transformed into a magic treasure that contained the power of the heavenly punishment Lightning Tribulation. It was said that the Defying Tian Temple used this lightning-severing branch as a treasure to stabilize their fate. What was more terrifying was that the Defying Tian Temple only changed its name to Yingtian Temple when it was passed down to Bu Xingzhou. Before Bu Xingzhou rose, many people once said that Bu Xingzhou didn't have any cultivation talent at all. Even if he cultivated his entire life, he wouldn't be able to break through the mortal evolution state. In reality, this was indeed the case. Bu Xingzhou wasted nearly 100 years in Yingtian Temple. His lifespan was almost up and he was plagued with illness. However, because of a strange dream, he had an epiphany and became the immortal true lord of today. Ever since Bu Xingzhou had made a name for himself, he had used formations, talismans, flying swords, and spells in fights. However, he had never seen Bu Xingzhou take out a supreme treasure like the thunder-severing branch before the fight officially began. In a sense, Bu Xingzhou was planning to fight with his life on the line. I wish all the readers a happy Children's Day and a carefree life forever. Chapter 1143. If the severing lightning branch was destroyed, Ying Tianguan's luck would directly dissipate. Even if a peerless genius entered the sect, it would be destined to be difficult for them to cultivate, unless they could obtain another treasure to suppress their luck. However, the possibility of obtaining another treasure was too small. Just like the sects in the world today, the overlords were still the original ones. Those small and medium-sized sects that did not have any treasures to suppress their luck were more relaxed. Their rise and fall was up to fate. It was possible for a peerless genius to appear only for a short time, and then for hundreds or thousands of years, the sect would be destroyed. This Bu Xingzhou, Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly. He was more and more certain that someone was targeting him from behind. Otherwise, Bu Xingzhou and the other two did not have much interaction with each other, and it was impossible for them to come to the northern frontier to deal with him. Battles between top experts rarely happened, because once both sides fought, they would use all their trump cards. They would not rest until they killed the other side. Therefore, at most, they would have some verbal conflicts. If you give me face, I will give you a way out. In the end, nothing was settled. In any case, the cultivators in the sky martial world did not even dare to pursue higher realms. They only wanted to live a peaceful life. If these three people simply did not like him, they would have already taken action to suppress him. In the sky martial world, cultivators and demonic beasts liked to find opponents of similar realms to fight. The main reason was that they did not want their juniors to become the prey of the strong while they were killing the weak. However, the protectors of the Heavenly Gate did not have such concerns about the northern frontier. They did not dare to touch Lin Yuan because they were afraid of the ancient demon court. Now, they were afraid of the background behind Lin Yuan that was even more terrifying than the ancient demon court. Otherwise, someone like Lin Yuan who did not respect the protectors of the Heavenly Gate would have been killed by them long ago. They came to the northern frontier to cause trouble, most likely because someone asked them to. As soon as he made a move, he directly put the fate of his own sect on the line. However, it didn't create much of a tragic and unyielding atmosphere. Instead, it made Lin Yuan even more certain that they were just hired thugs, and the other party was giving them benefits that they couldn't refuse. With the existence of the Willow Branch, Yu Jiang didn't dare to waste his energy to summon the 24 Heavens Phantoms again. Instead, he summoned gusts of plague wind and took the initiative to welcome Kagura and Batu. Very obviously, although he felt that Lin Yuan's idea was more difficult to deal with, he didn't put the gods of the northern frontier conferred by Lin Yuan in his eyes. He directly went up to fight 1 against 2 without any fear. Kong Xiang put his palms together. Golden Buddhist light erupted from his body. Although he didn't attack, he was still staring at Wei Li. The Buddhist inheritance of the martial heaven world wasn't perfect. It wasn't like the Western sect of the Great Desolate World. Those who could defeat them were called glaring Vajra, and those who couldn't defeat them were called low-browed bodhisattvas. The Buddhist inheritance of the martial heaven world mainly focused on the word, suppression. Even when facing a great demon like Wei Li, although Kong Xiang knew that he wasn't a match for him, he still had some confidence in stalling Wei Li. At this moment, the pressure was undoubtedly on Song Xuebua. Because the person this imperial preceptor of 7 dynasties wanted to deal with was Du Gumming. If he could defeat Du Gumming in a short period of time, then everything would be fine. No matter if it was his helper Bu Xingzhou or Kong Xiang, he would have the upper hand. But if he couldn't defeat Du Gumming, then once Kong Xiang was killed by Wei Li, then it wouldn't be a 4 against 5 situation anymore. Lin Yuan's gaze turned. He stared at the lightning branch in Bu Xingzhou's hand and said, "Old Taoist, you're smart. Seeing that the northern frontier is covered by thunderclouds, you took out a magic treasure that contains the power of lightning punishment. Firstly, you're relying on this item to restrain my lightning technique. Secondly, fighting in this kind of environment will strengthen your magic treasure to a certain extent. Your plan is pretty good. No wonder you dare to face this king alone." After being mocked by Lin Yuan, Bu Xingzhou's old face was instantly embarrassed. Indeed, he saw that Lin Yuan had already set up the battlefield, so he decided to stall Lin Yuan alone. This was because using the lightning branch in such an environment was like having heavenly help to him. If he did it well, he might even be able to use Lin Yuan's lightning technique to harm himself. That was indeed the case. However, the problem was that one shouldn't hit someone's face when fighting, and shouldn't expose someone's shortcomings when scolding. What the hell did you mean by saying it out loud? Although Bu Xingzhou usually considered himself as a transcendent realm, he was very clear that the so-called transcendent realm was still stuck in the sovereign realm. It was just that the divine power accumulated was much more than the ordinary sovereign realm. Even if he cultivated to the peak of the sovereign realm step by step, he wouldn't be able to compete with these transcendent realm experts. However, no matter what, his true realm was still higher than Lin Yuan. In the end, he was described in such a manner. It was as if he didn't have the lightning branch, he wouldn't dare to face Lin Yuan alone. Alright, he really didn't dare to. After all, the Black Jiao's invincibility in the northern frontier was too deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Lin Yuan, who was hidden in the thunderclouds, narrowed his eyes slightly and sneered, "But the problem is, who told you that I'm going to use lightning techniques?" Hearing this, Bu Xingzhou's heart suddenly sank. Just like what Yu Jiang said before, the flying clouds and summoning rain was originally the Dragon Clan's magical ability. However, it was actually used to scare people. The so-called lightning and rainstorm were simply a joke to cultivators. Even Heavenly Dipper realm cultivators could directly ignore it, unless something was done in the thunderstorm. However, since the Black Jiao became famous, he had fought many battles. However, who had seen this Black Jiao use lightning techniques? Too careless. Tiske. Bu Xingzhou's face was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. He glared at Lin Yuan angrily, as if he was a mute who had eaten Chinese gold thread. This Black Jiao created such a big scene, such as a rainstorm and thunderclouds. In the end, he didn't intend to use lightning techniques at all? Aren't you playing with me? Lin Yuan poked his head out from the thunderclouds and sneered, "Do you know, from the moment you appeared in the northern frontier, a group of Knight Bujiao's cavalry quietly set out. I reckon that they are near the Yingtian temple by now. I gave them the order that once the northern frontier changes, they are to immediately kill everyone in the temple. All the branch families, derivative families, and even the secular disciples are not to be spared. In other words, from the moment you all arrived at the northern frontier, this king planned to exterminate all of you." The torrential rain poured down and the thunderclouds shrouded the area. Although Bu Xingzhou couldn't see how sinister Lin Yuan's expression was, he could read the endless cold killing intent from the pair of indistinct blue and white eyes. This Black Jiao was serious. "Black Jiao, you despicable." After holding back for a long time, Bu Xingzhou's face turned red. In the end, he could only curse the word despicable. Because Lin Yuan's move to kill Ying Tianguan was simply a bad move from a macro perspective, but it did indeed hit Ying Tianguan's vital point. Chapter 1144. Why was this a bad move from a macroscopic point of view? Previously, there had been frequent incidents in the northern frontier because the Sky Demon had confronted the northern frontier. This had attracted a large number of effective forces from the northern frontier and caused them to neglect the supervision of the rear. This allowed the Shadow Demon Su Yan, the Rising Clouds dynasty, the venerable demon of the southern wasteland, and other forces to stir up trouble, causing the entire northern frontier to be in chaos. Although Lin Yuan's return from the Endless Sea was a boost, it had no effect on the overall situation. If the Sky Demon had not suddenly given up on confronting the northern frontier for some reason, the northern frontier would not have been able to solve the problem of the Hengduan Mountains. Even the immortals would have been able to cause trouble for the northern frontier. But what was Lin Yuan doing now? The situation had not stabilized, but he had sent people to the area occupied by the Sky Demon. If this was not provoking the Sky Demon, what was it? If the Sky Demon was really provoked by the northern frontier and turned back to attack the northern frontier, then Lin Yuan would have to spit out everything he had taken. He might even have to pay an even more painful price in order to stabilize the situation at the northern frontier. Aren't you afraid that the Sky Demon? Bu Xingzhou glared at him angrily. He felt as if a mouthful of blood was stuck in his chest, and he could not calm it down. There were still many sects and families in the Central Plains. It was not that they had joined forces with the extraterrestrial demons, but that these sects and families had the backing of the Elysium Guardians. They were an important source for the Elysium Guardians to absorb the power of incense. Therefore, after the outbreak of the extraterrestrial demons, many of the Elysium Guardians deliberately returned to their sects, either to set up a formation or personally suppress the extraterrestrial demons. This was the only way to preserve their inheritance. More importantly, there were some special resources in the territories of these large forces. These were things that they could not part with, so naturally they would not move them at will. In fact, there were similar sects and families in the south. Lin Yuan's plan in the south was not to directly move the entire south. At most, it would be to the point of emptiness. The top forces in the south were eager to do this and annexed a large number of territories without bloodshed. However, when he came to the northern frontier this time, although he had set up formations and trump cards to resist the Sky Demon, they could only defend against the Sky Demon. If an external power attacked or someone destroyed the formations from the inside, they did not even need to do anything. They could just leave after destroying the formations. The wandering Sky Demon would be able to kill everyone in the Ying Tianguan Temple. This was a move that truly hit his vital point. Territory was very important to the Ying Tianguan Temple, but to him he only cared about how many disciples and grand disciples could provide him with incense power to convert into divine power to extend his life. If these people were all massacred by the northern frontier, and he had used up a large amount of divine power in the northern frontier, even if he could defeat the Black Jiao, he would very quickly die from the exhaustion of his lifespan. In other words, regardless of whether it was true or not, since the Black Jiao had brought it up, he could only treat it as if it was true. Although the benefits given by that big shot were tempting, compared to his own little life, no reward was worth it. After a moment of silence, Bu Xingzhou slowly lowered the thunder-severing branch in his hand. He bitterly smiled and said, "Black Jiao, you win. I know you have a way to contact your people and have them stop. I can turn the muzzle to help you deal with Kong Xiang and Song Xuebua." Lin Yuan suddenly laughed. Before his laughter died down, his eyes were still filled with ruthlessness. "Bastard, you all King think that the northern frontier is a soft persimmon that you can pinch whenever you want. Now that you found out that the persimmon is not ripe, you want to run away?" With a thought, the scales on his body turned from black to gold, straightening his body. Lin Yuan's eyes gradually wiped away the emotions in them. He still breathed weakly, but it was as if he had turned from a living dragon into a dead creature. In his previous life, for the sake of revenge, he had trained himself almost like a masochist. Other than various unorthodox methods, he had also dabbled in Chinese martial arts. Compared to the nimble and graceful sword and the indomitable blade, Lin Yuan still preferred spear techniques. This was because the stronger the spear, the longer the spear. Although he had also trained in firearms abroad, he knew very well that his enemies would not wait for him in an open space with a wide field of vision. In the end, the deciding factor of success or failure was still close combat. Although spear techniques would be affected by the indoor environment, his enemies would not stay in an area that was 10 square meters or a few square meters. Compared to the sword and blade techniques, spear techniques were more suited to his requirements. If his enemies were standing far away and took out their guns, he could still attack them within a few steps if he held them. If it was a sword or a blade, could it be that he could use the imperial sword technique? He had trained in the Six Harmonies Great Spear, Baji Spear, and other spear techniques. He had also trained in the Yu Clan Spear and Yang Clan Spear while in the horse stance. Fitting in with the roaming dragon's 9 transformations, Lin Yuan's understanding of ancient martial arts from his previous life had also increased by several levels. In a situation where his lightning techniques were clearly restrained, Lin Yuan planned to use his spear techniques to properly deal with this era suppressor expert. As for where did the spear come from? He himself was the spear. Coupled with the third-person view activated by the Eye of God, Lin Yuan's body at this moment turned into a great spear, as if he was being held by an invisible person and pointed at Bu Xingzhou. Bu Xingzhou's figure slightly paused, his face filled with doubt. He could not feel the flow of demonic energy in Lin Yuan's body, nor could he predict how Lin Yuan would deal with him. At this moment he felt as if he was being stared at by something extremely terrifying. Kill? Following a roar, Bu Xingzhou suddenly felt a shadow flash in front of his eyes. He subconsciously dodged to the side and at the same time raised the severing thunder branch to meet it head-on. Ding ding dang dang. The severing thunder branch and the flood dragon's tail constantly collided, producing a series of metal clanging sounds. Vaguely, one could even see the explosions of demonic energy and demonic energy. The golden scales on the flood dragon's tail constantly shattered, and the proficiency of the golden body secrets began to decrease. The attribute drops began to increase, and the golden body secrets once again reached the peak level. During this process, the two sides would collide thousands or even tens of thousands of times in almost every breath of time. Good treasure. Lin Yuan retreated a little more than 10 meters, once again hiding in the thunderclouds, and opened his mouth to praise. What he had just used was the piercing word technique of the three major elements of spear techniques. Ordinary people who practiced the piercing word technique, such as Swallow Flying Curtain, could be considered an expert. The great spear master of the Three Kingdoms era, Tong Yuan, was an expert in this field. His 100 birds worshipping the phoenix was 100 spears instantaneously. Although it was unknown how much of this 100 birds worshipping the phoenix was exaggerated by others, but if there really was someone who could achieve 100 spears instantaneously, then even Lu Bu, who was known as the #1 horse fighter of the era, would be pierced into a sieve in one round. It was just like how some Guishu experts could use cold weapons to cut or block bullets, but that was only for pistols. You want them to try using a cold weapon to meet a submachine gun head-on? Moreover, 100 spears per second could not even be considered a submachine gun. Even Ma Xiaoxing could only fire 600 spears per minute. With Lin Yuan's current attributes, using the piercing word technique and a heavy machine gun were no longer enough to describe his terrifying speed. When the two sides collided, there was even a gap in the rainstorm. It was simply unable to penetrate Lin Yuan's spear curtain. Chapter 1145. However, under such a terrifying spear curtain, Bu Xingzhou was barely able to keep up with Lin Yuan's rhythm, and he was able to take on the Jia formula one by one. However, this was also the meaning of the question. After all, Bu Xingzhou was more than a realm higher than Lin Yuan. No matter how bad his basic attributes were, they wouldn't be lower than Lin Yuan's. He also had a lot of battle experience. If he couldn't even react to this, then the so-called era suppressor would be a joke. The only thing that caught Lin Yuan's attention was that lightning branch. Too hard, too hard. In that instant of collision, Lin Yuan spent at least 2,000 attribute points to maintain the strength of the golden body chant. However, he could repair his own injuries, but the lightning branch didn't have such an ability. In other words, his own defense combined with the buff of the golden body chant couldn't even shake the lightning branch. It didn't even cause a crack. This was enough to show how powerful this treasure was. As expected of the treasure that stabilized the sect's fate. However, Lin Yuan's eyes became fierce again. He moved and used the take word and suddenly hit Bu Xingzhou's wrist from bottom to top. Bu Xingzhou felt the pain and subconsciously wanted to let go. However, a thought flashed in his mind. He actually gritted his teeth and forcefully held onto the lightning branch that was about to leave his hand. When he looked at Lin Yuan again, his eyes were filled with shock. The heaven martial world didn't care about techniques. Most of the fights were just a straightforward exchange of blows. Even mortal evolution state martial artists mostly used the open tablet hand to fight. When he clashed with Lin Yuan before, he felt that Lin Yuan's fighting style was like a swallow flying through a curtain. There was no rhythm, but there seemed to be some kind of rhythm. Although he couldn't grasp that rhythm, he could still use his body and reflexes to forcefully receive it. However, when Lin Yuan attacked again, he suddenly changed his fighting style and almost caught him blind. He didn't dare to think that once he lost the severing thunder branch and encountered Lin Yuan's previous attack that was like a swallow flying through a curtain, what other way could he use to deal with it other than flying back and retreating? He could retreat, but if he retreated he would lose the lightning branch. At that time he would be even more miserable. The corners of Lin Yuan's mouth slightly widened as he looked at Bu Xingzhou with a sinister grin. There was an old saying in Wuxia, skills can approach the Tao and skills can approach the gods. Humans had always had an inexplicable thirst for power. Before the heavenly connection, humans were extremely passionate about the Tao of cultivation. Any mighty figure who fought his way into the heavenly court could easily encounter hundreds of thousands of celestial soldiers and celestial generals. These celestial soldiers and celestial generals were not the orthodox immortals, but the powerful qi practitioners of the mortal world who were recognized by the heavenly court and obtained the immortal records that could extend their lifespans. Thus they called themselves immortals. Later on, the path of cultivation declined, and the path of martial arts flourished. Southern fist, northern kick, and the 18 types of weapons prevailed all over the world. Even in Lin Yuan's previous life, when even martial arts had declined, there were still countless people who still had the dream of becoming a martial artist. After the path of cultivation was lost, if humans wanted to become strong, they had to continuously study all kinds of skills. When some skills reached a certain level, they could even reach the level of the Great Tao, or it could be said that they were originally a type of Great Tao. Ancient martial arts is a skill that generations of outstanding people have continuously studied, pondered, and perfected after the path of cultivation has been cut off. The martial artists of the Jianghu world are inferior to the cultivators because these so-called martial artists are actually the lowest level of cultivators. The two originally belonged to the same system. If the cultivation and physical quality are suppressed, the martial artists of the Jianghu world are simply incomparable to the martial artists of Lin Yuan's world. It can even be said that they are amateurs. Some ancient martial arts, even when used in a battle with cultivators, would not be at a disadvantage at all. After grasping a certain skill, Lin Yuan looked at the natives of the sky martial world and felt that they indeed had the qualifications to be proud. Die! Lin Yuan angrily roared. He still used his body as a spear and continuously collided with the severing lightning branch. His spear technique changed again and again. Bu Xingzhou, who had his wrist injured by Lin Yuan, complained incessantly. He once again began to doubt himself. Was his brain kicked by a donkey? Why did he give up on Badu and Kagura, who were clearly easier to bully, and insisted on fighting the Black Jiao one-on-one? Originally, it was Yu Jiang against the Black Jiao. In the end, his opponent was snatched away. Yu Jiang actually felt somewhat relieved. Now he was suppressing Kagura and Badu with his own strength. Although he could not win the battle in a short period of time, he did indeed have the upper hand. On the other side, Song Xuebua, who could be said to be the hope of the entire village, silently looked at Du Guming. His lips opened and closed as he muttered to himself. A moment later, a 3-foot-long weasel hair brush appeared in his hand. His eyes narrowed slightly, and 2 drops of ink formed by Gang Qi dripped from the tip of the weasel hair brush. When the ink touched the ground, it transformed into 2 strong men like iron towers, standing guard in front of Song Xuebua. Du Guming slightly narrowed his eyes. The long sword in his hand slightly swayed. His clear black and white eyes could not hide the trace of disappointment in them. As an assassin, one must remember the iron rule: if one strike does not kill, flee 1,000 miles away. It was not a perverted requirement to kill the target in one strike. If one could not kill the target in one strike, he would not continue to fight and would immediately flee. But for an assassin, pursuing a one-strike kill was definitely not wrong. However, his experience told him that one strike would definitely not be able to kill Song Xuebua. If he used too much strength, he would instead be in danger of being counterattacked by Song Xuebua. It was clear that this was not the first time Song Xuebua had come into contact with a top assassin. Thus, from the moment Du Guming drew his sword, he had already prepared these 2 ink-stout men as guards. This was Wondrous Brush Blossoms, a supreme secret technique of the Confucian sect. Using one's true qi as ink, one could summon thousands of men and horses to charge and kill the enemy. If he had not grasped this secret technique, even if Song Xuebua had the ability to reach the heavens, he would not have been able to single-handedly stir up the winds and clouds of the 7 great empires. In the past, when the monarchs of the 7 great empires saw Song Xuebua, they all had to respectfully call him teacher. Just how awe-inspiring was this? Just a mere assassin. Song Xuebua bit his lips. His eyes revealed an unconcealable killing intent. The Confucian sect worshipped the saying that people are divided into 3, 6, and 9 ranks. Among them, not being able to punish a scholar official was the most important. Even if it was just a Xiuzai-level disciple, they could still not kneel in front of an official. From this, one could see how honorable the Confucian sect cultivators were. As for assassins, in the eyes of the Confucian sect, they could only be considered as the lowest of the low, the lowest of the low. Just being glanced at by Du Guming made Song Xuebuo want to take a few baths and scrub off a layer of skin on his body. Although he maintained a look of contempt on his face, under Du Guming's gaze, Song Xuebuo could still feel a chill run down his spine. Chapter 1146. The battle between Wei Li and Kong Xiang wasn't as intense as the others. It was mainly about silence. Kong Xiang and Wei Li had maintained their posture of standing and staring at each other until now. It seemed calm and peaceful, but both of their auras were firmly locked onto each other. Compared to a fist-to-flesh fight, this kind of game was even more dangerous. This was because if they revealed even the slightest flaw, then the other party's storm-like attacks would follow. Unless something unexpected happened, causing both parties to shake hands and make peace, they would have to maintain this kind of silence. Only one of them could leave alive. Kong Xiang put his palms together. His handsome face had a merciful expression. Buddhist light flowed in his eyes as he stared at Wei Li without moving. Wei Li crossed his arms in front of his chest. He had an obvious look of ridicule on his face, as if he was mocking this monk who overestimated himself. Stop looking. Even if you stare until your eyes are broken, you still won't be able to find a flaw in your grandfather's body. Wei Li's mouth was trash-talking, but his body obediently maintained a silent posture. He was always on guard against Kong Xiang. The monks of Buddhism all had one thing in common, and that was that they were especially difficult to deal with. This was especially true for monks who cultivated the suppress technique. There were even some who suppressed demons under the cliff and sat in their own bodies for thousands of years until the last trace of Buddhist aura was exhausted. Their corpses were then blown away by the mountain wind into powder and disappeared without a trace. They were ruthless people who had no complaints or regrets. Speaking of which, you came from Mount Shaoi, right? Wei Li saw that Kong Xiang ignored him and started another topic. He said with a smile, I do know a monk from Mount Shaoi. His Buddhist name seems to be, what's it called? Oh, right, Qingxian. That old monk was very interesting. He said that he was willing to sit in front of me for the rest of his life and use the supreme Buddhist Dharma to wash away my sins. Hearing the name Qingxian, Kong Xiang took a deep breath and said indifferently, And then? After that, I broke his limbs and threw him into the demonic beast forest to feed the demonic beast. The corners of Wei Li's mouth curled up slightly. He took a deep breath and teased, In my life the thing I hate the most is you monks telling me to put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha on the spot. Even if there is such a thing, the one to become a Buddha should be that butcher's knife. After all, it was not willing to kill. It was the butcher who insisted on using it to kill, wasn't it? Yes. Kong Xiang's face suddenly changed and the benevolent look on his face disappeared. In the blink of an eye, his handsome face was completely filled with resentment and malevolence as he roared, A person like you is indeed not worthy of listening to the story of, lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha on the spot. What you lack is someone who will personally send you to meet Buddha. The Buddhist light dimmed and a murderous aura filled the air. Although Kong Xiang's momentum was broken, Wei Li did not immediately make a move. Instead, he revealed a thoughtful look and said, Could it be that you have never competed with that person for the title of the number one person in Buddhism? It seems that you do have some self-awareness. You are indeed not worthy. Little monk, it seems that your master's death has dealt a huge blow to you. You are actually so angry that you even took the opportunity to enter the devil path? But... Wei Li paused for a moment, and a large amount of black evil aura whizzed out like a rushing river. In the blink of an eye, it formed a ferocious devil image that was more than 10 feet tall behind Wei Li. Its appearance was 70% similar to Wei Li, but it was much more ferocious and terrifying. When the devil image appeared, Wei Li's voice also became hoarse. Little monk, since you have entered the devil path, you have to abide by the rules. The devil path does as one pleases. What rules are there? Although Kong Xiang's evil aura was not as strong as Wei Li's, his Buddhist power was still incomparably vigorous even though it was polluted. The flickering Buddhist light around him constantly collided with the evil aura overflowing from Wei Li's devil image. That's a lot. Today I will teach you the first lesson, respect your master. Wei Li's voice was low and hoarse as if he was groaning, but also as if he was roaring. The rules of the devil path cannot be disobeyed. If you break the rules that day, you will have to pay the lightest price, which is your life. However, little monk, you are different. You are alone, and even your master has been killed by me. So no matter how angry I am, in the end I will still kill you. You have profited. Dark green flames gradually spread out from Wei Li's body. Together with the devil image behind him, it was as if an ancient great devil had broken out of its seal and was roaring towards the heavens, preparing to bring a calamity to the common people. Other than the almighty experts from the Great Desolation era, when the natives of the Sky Martial world saw this scene, regardless of their faction or realm, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. Ever since the Void Netherworld realm became human sovereigns, countless true experts went into seclusion. With the passage of time, the cultivators of the Void Netherworld realm gradually developed the style of a big shot, rarely personally taking action. Although the 7 great empires, the Endless Sea, and the 2 great demonic beast veins were all at war and seemed to be very fierce, in reality, all the empires were just small cats and there was nothing to see. However, this time in the northern frontier, a chaotic battle between 9 peak experts. Although it was exciting, there were only a few people who wished for them to really fight. Even some of the Heavenly Gate Guardians could not hold themselves back and planned to intervene. After all, with 9 peak experts taking action, even if the Black Jiao, Kagura, and Bata worked together to control the situation, they might not be able to protect the northern frontier. Although everyone wanted Black Jiao to die and the northern frontier to be destroyed, the conditions had to be reasonable. It should be known that once the northern frontier was destroyed, it meant that the agreement between the Heavenly Gate Guardians and the Sky Demon would lose its effect. At that time, the Sky Demon would run amok, and the few empires nearby would not be able to gain any benefits. Moreover, if the northern frontier was destroyed, who knew what kind of monster would appear from the remains of the northern frontier to take over the position of the northern frontier? That might be even more ferocious than the period when the Black Jiao ruled. Among the Heavenly Gate Guardians, the Shangqing Tianzuan, whose code name was Tsang, waved his hand expressionlessly. Then, a few Heavenly Gate Guardians who were approaching the northern frontier immediately returned home. Some of the Heavenly Gate Guardians who were also preparing to set off also maintained their silence. This was the position of Tsang among the Heavenly Gate Guardians. He was a true top-level boss. Even many of the Heavenly Gate Guardians themselves did not know how many people in the organization were following Tsang for a living. After all, Tsang was one of the few who had established connections with other worlds and could promote exchanges of cultivation techniques or trade cultivation resources. Without Tsang as a bridge, the cultivation world of the Jianghu world would at least regress by more than 1,000 years. Now that the boss wanted to see the chaotic battle at the northern frontier, how could they, as errand boys, refuse? Chapter 1147. A crisp sound rang out. Lin Yuan and Bu Xingzhou clashed, then separated. At this moment, the severing thunder branch was almost stained with golden blood. Any drop of it would be an excellent material for refining elixirs on the market. However, no one dared to be greedy enough to throw it out to collect the blood. Not to mention that the main characters were watching from the side. Just by looking at the atmosphere, one would know that the 9 people fighting were definitely the strongest in the world. Getting involved in this kind of battle, even 10 lives wouldn't be enough to save one's life. However, the blood wasn't the main point of Lin Yuan's attention. The main point was that Lin Yuan had used his body as a spear, crazily clashing with the lightning-severing branch at least 1,000,000 times. This almost masochistic behavior had finally caused a crack to appear on the supreme treasure that had been suppressing Ying Tianguan's destiny. Don't underestimate this sliver of a crack. The development of the unorthodox Dao in the Jianghu world couldn't be considered as flourishing. Only the regions near the Hengduan mountain range had more refiners. Only those demon slayers who had to fight against demonic beasts would spend large amounts of money to purchase various types of equipment. For demon slayers, if they were well prepared, then their safety would be more assured. It was also because of the existence of demon slayers that the northern frontier's refiners prospered. They had laid a good foundation for the current northern frontier's Ministry of Works. However, things like magical treasures were still unworthy existences in the Jianghu world. Although they could greatly increase the strength of the wielder, the natives of the Jianghu world were more willing to believe in themselves than inanimate objects. Therefore, the refinement techniques were relatively backward. After so many years, there were only a few treasures that had been passed down from generation to generation. The magical treasures that could truly suppress the destiny of a sect weren't actually forged. Instead, they were existences similar to innate spiritual treasures. This type of naturally formed magical equipment actually had the characteristics of being completely natural and flawless. Therefore, the thunder-severing branch was either completely undamaged, or once a crack appeared, it meant that it couldn't hold on any longer. If it continued to collide at a high intensity, it was likely that before Bu Xingzhou was beaten to death, the thunder-severing branch would shatter into pieces. Black Jiao, you vicious beast. Bu Xingzhou thought for a moment, then his expression suddenly changed and he cursed. After all, the thunder-severing branch was a supreme treasure that was used to stabilize Ying Tianguan's luck. A treasure of this level could not be broken easily. Let alone millions of hits, even if it was 100 million or 1 billion times, as long as Black Jiao could not shake Ying Tianguan's luck, the thunder-severing branch would remain intact. But now, the severed lightning branch had split open on its own, which undoubtedly meant one thing. The northern frontier had made a move against the Heaven Temple. For a treasure that had accompanied him for thousands of years, Bu Xingzhou knew the thunder-severing branch like the back of his hand. He knew very well that the thunder-severing branch was not broken by Lin Yuan's tyrannical physical body, but when it was separated, the power of luck that wrapped around the thunder-severing branch dissipated, causing the magical treasure to split open on its own. It was a warning to him that Ying Tianguan had been targeted. As everyone knew, although the Black Jiao of the northern frontier was arrogant and challenged authority with every step he took, the Black Jiao had a strong point that most people could not do, and that was, he was a man of his words. Whether it was Ying Tianguan or defying Tianguan, if the Dragon King said that he would destroy your entire sect, then he would destroy your entire sect. Therefore, once the people of the northern frontier appeared near Ying Tianguan, there would be no survivors after the battle. At that time, where would he go to rebuild his orthodoxy and recruit enough disciples to provide him with the power of incense? Bu Xingzhou lowered his head slightly with a gloomy face. If not for the Black Jiao being so difficult to deal with, he even had the thought of paying a certain price to escape. But the problem was, the monk could run away but the temple could not. Even if he ran away from the north today, it would not take long for the Black Flood Dragon to reach Ying Tian Temple. When that time came, where could he escape to? Unknowingly, he seemed to have been forced into a dead end. At the same time, Shenwu Dynasty, near the former imperial capital. Yi Bilan led 2,000 cavalrymen, all of whom were wearing black armor and dark green robes. There were sabers at their waists, spears in their right hands, and sniper crossbows with a shooting range of more than 6,000 steps were hanging on their saddles. According to the experimental data of the Ministry of Works, such a steel crossbow could even kill a cultivator in the middle stage of Heavengang realm in an instant when it was about 2,000 steps away. Demonic beasts in the Mountain Lord realm might not be killed by the first arrow, but they would not be able to resist the second arrow. Moreover, after being hit by the first arrow, even demonic beasts would not be able to stand up easily. Yi Bilan let go of the reins with his left hand, held the spear in his hand upside down and growled, "According to the map, Ying Tianguan should be in the vicinity. It is a chaotic time, so it is normal for them to expand their territory. From now on, get ready for battle. Divide into 4 groups and search separately. If you meet the enemy scouts, don't fight with them unless you are absolutely sure that you can kill all of them. Remember to hide your whereabouts well. When you get the exact information, gather at the predetermined place to discuss the next step." Speaking of this, Yi Bilan touched his nose and grinned grimly. "Today should be the first time for most of you to carry out a field mission. I think, from the day you entered the field, you should know what will happen if we fail. I'm afraid that it will be difficult to even gather a whole corpse. Furthermore, this time, we're not simply here to complete the mission. We're here to warn those embroidered uniform guards who are getting more and more arrogant. Don't make it seem like we can't go out into the field. This is the final test that we've specially arranged for you. If anything goes wrong, you can forget about becoming an official member for the rest of your life." "Yes." The 2,000 members of Butake Knight answered in a low voice. Their voices and intonations were extremely uniform and low enough. If one didn't carefully distinguish the difference between the accents, it would seem that they were the same person answering in a muffled voice. No one would simply treat this operation as a routine field operation by Knight Buyao, because from the moment Knight Buyao was established, it had always been an intelligence organization that stood side by side with the embroidered uniform guards. It was just that Knight Buyao was external, while the embroidered uniform guards were internal. The association of the Demon Emperor and the MI7 had taken away a certain amount of authority from these two organizations, forming a restriction on the two, but not threatening their positions. Butake Knight was originally an active ranger on the Frost Mirror grassland. However, with the implementation of the Northern Frontier Plan, the Shuangjin dynasty now existed in name only. Butake Knight could continue to be active on the Frost Mirror grassland, but its focus would begin to shift. Chapter 1148. Especially after Li Xian took over the Embroidered Uniform Guard, the entire Embroidered Uniform Guard Yamen became crazier, even more terrifying than when Luo Su was in charge. Luo Su was a mad dog. No one knew what his goal was. In any case, he acted according to Lin Yuan's request. But at that time, the various forces on the northern frontier were simply afraid of the Embroidered Uniform Guard's strength. But now that Li Xian was the commander, it was different. The biggest difference between Li Xian and Luo Su was that Li Xian would not kill for the sake of killing. He used the authority of the Embroidered Uniform Guard to block most of the various forces on the northern frontier. He did not even need to wield a butcher's knife. They would kneel down and admit their mistakes. Luo Su's reign and Li Xian's were practically two different eras. Yi Bilan originally did not want to care about this kind of thing, but he really had no choice. After all, Yi Busho was now in charge of supervising the Embroidered Uniform Guard. Once Li Xian completely stabilized his position and forced the various forces on the northern frontier to bow their heads, Yi Bilan would have nothing to do with it. That was why Yi Bilin volunteered to lead Knight Busho to carry out the order to massacre Ying Tianguan. He wanted to shift Knight Bush's focus to the mainland. Although he might not be able to keep Li Xian in check, at least he wouldn't let the Imperial Secret Service dominate the mainland. Clap, clap. Yi Bilan gently clapped his hands twice and said with a smile, "That's it for the time being. Let's spread out and collect all kinds of information as fast as possible. When the time is right. Don't forget our Dragon King has asked us to kill all these bastards. We'll try to take them away in one wave. Don't let anyone escape. Otherwise we'll be in trouble." Soon 2,000 of Yi Bush's elite cavalry were split up. Each team of 500 people was further subdivided into action groups of 4 people. They spread out to gather information. The main purpose was to determine where Yingtian Temple's members gathered, how many cultivators and mortals there were in these places, the level of cultivation in the cultivation world, the fortifications of these strongholds, and so on. If they had the ability, it would be best to formulate the most efficient attack plan. These Yi Busho had originally gone through a strict assessment before becoming a reserve. They had also developed first-rate horsemanship and fighting skills through numerous battles with the Frost Mirror Barbarian. Not to mention dealing with a temporarily organized scout of a sect. They were even confident that they could follow a tribe on the grasslands and keep the distance from them within 100 kilometers without them noticing their presence. Sitting on the back of the warhorse, Yi Bilan gloomily stared at the area where Ying Tianguan was located on the map. Dared to cause the northern Yingtian temples, they must pay the price. Dragon King said that he wanted all these people to die so none of them could escape. At this moment, Yingtian Temple, who was still intoxicated by the birth of their ancestor, was exuding a happy atmosphere. Even the sky demon outside was only a small trouble, and would be dealt with by their ancestors sooner or later. Yingtian Temple naturally had to celebrate after taking over a large amount of territory without shedding a drop of blood. Many people were ridiculing the northern Yingtian Temple for being fools. Moved the sects and families in the south, and did not rush to occupy the Jianghu dynasty's territory. Wasn't it obvious that they wanted to let the sects and families who had not yet moved develop and become stronger? At this pace, it was hard to say whether they would replace the Jianghu dynasty as the northern Yingtian Temple's territory in the future. But they completely did not expect that a massacre from the northern Yingtian Temple was madly brewing around them. Yi Bilan's intelligence gathering was absolutely terrifying. After all, the standard that Yi Bilan had set for Yi Bilan was that once the higher-ups set their eyes on a certain grassland tribe, they must get the most detailed report in the shortest time possible. It was so terrifying that even what the tribe's Khan ate at night, who he ate with, what he said during the meal and so on, had to be recorded. This time, after Yi Bilan's members annihilated and avoided some of the mounted scouts, they immediately began to disguise themselves. Some disguised themselves as mounted scouts, while others disguised themselves as refugees. In 2s and 3s they walked towards the nearby stronghold of Yingtian Temple. Although Yingtian Temple had some doubts and did not know where so many people suddenly came from, they were not stupid enough to think that some refugees were from the northern Yingtian Temple. After a few simple questions they let all the refugees into the stronghold. Everyone had ambition and Yingtian Temple was no exception. In the past there was a shortage of manpower in the sect, so they could only hide in the sect and watch others eat meat. At most they could only eat soup. But now, the founder had come out of his closed-door training and joined hands with several strongmen to go directly to the Black Jiao in the northern Yingtian Temple. Once the founder came back, Yingtian Temple would change and become one of the most powerful forces in the world. Naturally, they would take in refugees. If there were only a group of cultivators, how could they establish a country? Would they let these noble cultivators cultivate the land? 2 hours later, Yi Bilan, who was sitting on the horse and pretending to be asleep, suddenly opened his eyes and said in a low voice, "Everyone put on armor and get on the horse. Go to the planned place of attack and act according to the plan." Only after 2 hours, Yi Bilan had already gotten most of the information that he wanted to know. The heaven-facing temple was indeed in this area, but this wasn't the real heaven-facing temple. In the past, Bu Xingzhou had an epiphany and opened up a heavenly grotto. He hid the original heaven-defying temple inside the heavenly grotto and then built the present heaven-facing temple on the original site. It wasn't that the sect didn't have enough disciples, it was just that the heaven-facing temple could only be considered an outer sect. The real seedlings were all taken into the heavenly grotto and entered the inner sect, the heaven-defying temple. With Yingtian Temple as the center, there were 108 towns around it. Even the smallest town had a population of nearly 10 million. These towns were all funded by Yingtian Temple. The castellans and the aristocratic families in the cities were most likely related to Nidian Temple. Therefore there was a formation eye under each town. Only by destroying these 108 formation eyes could the entrance of the cave heaven world be exposed to the surface world. Otherwise, they had to contact the deacons of Nidian Temple at a certain time and ask them to guide them. As for when and how to contact the deacons of Nidian Temple, they did not interrogate them. After all, these things were the secrets of the higher-ups of Yingtian Temple. The people below had at most seen or heard about it, but they did not know the specific details. 108 cities with a population of at least a few billion? How could they fight if they did not take in the cavalry? Chapter 1149. As one of Lin Yuan's creations, Yi Bilan could directly communicate with Lin Yuan through his consciousness. However, Yi Bilan had no intention of communicating with Lin Yuan to ask for reinforcements. This time Yi Busho had stolen the job of the embroidered uniform guards. Now that the border of the Frost Mirror grassland was at war, apart from the Blackwater Army, the Northern Frontier Dragon Cavalry, and the original border guards, the main force was Yi Bushi's cavalry. It could even be said that without Yi Busho leading the way, those Frost Mirror barbarian who were familiar with the terrain would have a hard time catching them. The 2,000 cavalry here were all that Yi Bilan could muster. Call for reinforcements? He couldn't possibly ask the Northern Frontier to give up on supervising the entire territory and send people from the Association of the Demon Emperor, right? If he really called for reinforcements, it would definitely be the members of the embroidered uniform guards. Who knew how Li Xen would ridicule him? Yi Bilan gripped the spear in his hand and said in a deep voice, "If you want to deal with Yingtian Temple, you have to first destroy the 108 formation eyes of the hidden grotto heaven entrance. Not counting the refugees, there are billions of people. Even if they are all mortals, it will take you until next month to kill them all. Therefore, I will give you 3 days to infiltrate the various cities and towns and find out the formation eyes. Find out the name, background, and cultivation of the members of Yingtian Temple who are in charge of guarding the place. Do not leave out a single detail." These cities and towns all had nominal leaders. Some were disciples of Yingtian Temple, while some were old officials of the Jianghu dynasty. However, they were all taken over by Yingtian Temple on the first day they took office. Even if the city lord wasn't from Yingtian Temple, he was only the city lord. All the officials in the city and even the garrison army were disciples of Yingtian Temple. Not to mention the collapse of the Jianghu dynasty, even when the Jianghu dynasty was at its peak, they didn't dare to interfere with Yingtian Temple's affairs. After all, they had the protection of an immortal true monarch. Lei Qiuxing was also afraid. If there was no need, why would he provoke the guardian of the heavenly gate? But this time the Dragon King had spoken. Then all the people related to Yingtian Temple would have to die. Outside Shunning City, Bu Xingzhou narrowed his eyes, sizing up Lin Yuan's murderous aura, then said in a low voice, "Black Jiao, I admit that I made a mistake this time. However, I feel that even though you are a demonic beast, you do not lose to a human in any aspect. Since that is the case, then you should be clear that there are no fairy tales in this world. Everything has to be based on benefits. If you are not moved, then it can only be because the benefits I offer are not enough." At this point, he paused for a moment and sighed as if he was discouraged. He then continued, "So, tell me. As long as your conditions aren't excessive, I can accept them. When this matter is over, I can also disband Yingtian Temple and hand over the aristocratic families under my command to you. In the war to conquer the Xinwu dynasty's territory, my Yingtian Temple's disciples can also serve as your vanguard. I will also enter the northern frontier for your command. How about it? If there's anything else you want to add, feel free to say it." Bu Xingzhou was very confident. This was because he felt that the bargaining chip he offered was definitely a huge bet. The existence of Yingtian Temple could not be hidden. Black Jiao would know about it sooner or later. However, Yingtian Temple only appeared on the surface. Even if all of their elite disciples were transferred over in recent years, they still maintained the strength of a second-rate sect on the surface. In fact, they were even stronger. Yingtian Temple had no less than 30 Void Realm cultivators. Even the Xinwu dynasty could not compare to them. In addition, he was a Transcendent Realm existence, which added a huge bet to this bargaining chip. With the help of a Transcendent Realm expert, even the other Heavenly Gate Guardians' forces would have to welcome him, let alone the developing northern frontier. Next, whether it was fighting against the Sky Demon, recovering the territory of the Xinwu dynasty, or continuing to expand and annex the Frost Mirror Grassland or other dynasties, with the help of a Transcendent Realm expert, their chances of winning would increase by at least 3 times. Yeah. Lin Yuan nodded slightly and said with a smile, "Your bargaining chip is indeed very tempting. I also feel your sincerity. However, I've always kept my word. This is something you know. Therefore, from the moment you stood in front of me, you're already a dead man. I won't let go of your entire Yingtian Temple. You're courting death." Bu Xingzhou's face was ferocious. He took the initiative to raise the Severing Thunder branch. Lightning flashed on the pitch-black wooden stick. It actually attracted the power of lightning in the surrounding thunderclouds and turned into a lightning dragon that attached itself to the Severing Thunder branch. "Woohoo, this old Taoist is going to go all out." Wei Li smiled and clapped his hands. His entire body was covered in dark green flames. Under his feet was Kong Xiang's head, which was bleeding from his 7 orifices. Kong Xiang's body had already been burned to a crisp by the dark green flames, leaving only a bald head. His handsomeness and bearing had all disappeared without a trace. His facial features that were excessively pale after losing blood were filled with resentment. Combined with his appearance that was bleeding from his 7 orifices, he looked even more sinister and terrifying. While laughing, Wei Li's face suddenly paled. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of dark brown blood. He cursed, "This damn little monk is quite vicious. He knew that he couldn't beat me, so he risked his life and poured all his Buddhist energy into my body. If it wasn't for my profound cultivation, I'm afraid my body would have exploded on the spot and I would have died together with a damn monk like you. I need to pay more." Dugu Ming slowly sheathed his long sword. His elegant chivalrous robe hung on his body like rags. His left sleeve had already been cut off. To be more precise, his left hand was only left with the upper half of his arm. The neat cut was not blood but black ink. It was clear that the elegant and handsome Song Shuebwa did not do a clean job. The ink that he condensed with his aura energy clearly contained poison. Behind him, Song Shuebwa still maintained his standing posture. However, the bamboo in his right hand was tattered. The weasel hairbrush in his left hand was also cut in half. There was a thin line of blood on his neck. Dugu Ming's sword was very fast. When the blade cut into Song Shuebwa's neck, Song Shuebwa's wound had already healed. However, the domineering aura energy still destroyed Song Shuebwa's life force, turning him into an ice-cold corpse. And the price for a one-hit kill was an arm. Very few people knew that Dugu Ming used the Mother-Child Sword. The Mother-Child Sword killed while the Mother-Child Sword blocked. In the past assassinations, Dugu Ming's Mother-Child Sword could be said to be successful. It could even be considered a strange move. However, this time Song Shuebwa's counterattack was too fast and too fierce. It was as if he planned to use his life to exchange for Dugu Ming's. Even if Dugu Ming's reaction was fast enough, he still left half of his arm behind. Even the Mother-Child Sword was exposed to the sight of countless spectators. Even if he used spiritual items to heal his arm, his threat would be greatly reduced in the future. Chapter 1150. Yu Jiang, who was fighting Kagura and Batu, was not in a good state either. Although the outcome had not been decided, the 4 green snakes around Yu Jiang had been completely killed, and even one of his wings had been cut off. As for Batu and Kagura, although they were covered in wounds, They had not lost their ability to fight and were still staring at him covetously. Especially Batu. This fellow's priesthood was originally war and conquest, and he also had the luck of the northern frontier. While fighting Yu Jiang, he also dragged Yu Jiang into the war god domain. The more intense the battle between the two sides, the more terrifying the boost Batu received. In addition, although Kagura's priesthood was in charge of harvest, she could still use some simple incense power. While she was frantically healing Batu's injuries, she was also constantly creating obstructive traps for Yu Jiang. Yu Jiang even had a bad premonition. If this continued, he might not be a match for these two new gods. However, this was normal. After all, these prehistoric creatures were extremely powerful, but there was a limit to the world's capacity. They could not fully unleash their peak combat strength, and they did not have time to bring all their belongings when they fled, especially on the home ground of the northern frontier. Yu Jiang was indeed the sea god of the North Sea, but the northern frontier was not his dojo. If he wanted to exercise the priesthood of the sea god of the northern frontier, he had to see if the Dragon King of the northern frontier was willing to give him face. He could fight against two people by himself because of the abundant incense power he had accumulated in the past. However, no matter how abundant it was, there was a limit. The human world worshipped the northern celestial emperor Xuanxu. Even though Xuanxu later handed over the priesthood of the northern celestial emperor to his minister, Xianming, people still worshipped Xuanming's incarnation, Jianghu the great emperor. It had nothing to do with him, the sea god of the North Sea. After Lin Yuan's era, people did not even believe in Xuanxu, let alone care about the identity of the sea god of the North Sea. At this moment, the scales of victory had begun to tilt towards the northern frontier. Yu Jiang flapped his wings and forced Batu to retreat. He roared, "Di Shang, what are you waiting for?" Di Shang. When he heard this name, Lin Yuan could not help but be slightly stunned. The prehistoric creatures watching the battle could not help but hold their breaths. After the fall of the Shang dynasty and before the reign of Qin Shi Huang, there was only one human king in the world. In the 800 years of the Zhou dynasty and the later spring and autumn period and the Warring States period, the rulers were basically the son of heaven and not the human king. Those in the Warring States period were not even the son of heaven, but only the king of vassals. To the high and mighty creatures in the untainted land, no one cared about the life and death of these vassals except for the Grand Supremes and other powerful people who had set up the human world. But Di Shang was different. Other than Shanqing Tianzuan, they either hid from the world like Hamba or they had more or less fought with Di Shang. These mighty people from the prehistoric world knew very well how terrifying the human king who carried the will of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors was. In the prehistoric world, he forced Hongjun, who was the ruler at that time, to want to get rid of him, but he was helpless. He could only set off a calamity and joined hands with the heavenly Dao to cultivate the emperor of Zhou. He even caused the Rin school, Chan school and Western school to join hands and almost defeat the Shang dynasty. In the end, the battle was so intense that even the 6 saints of heaven had to join the battle. From this point alone, it could be seen how terrifying the Shang dynasty, who dared to compete with heaven, was. Originally, the northern frontier could be considered a sure win. However, if Di Shang was involved and Di Shang was on the same side as Yu Jiang, even if the remaining few joined forces, they could not defeat Di Shang. But it should not be. The human king who was crazily discredited was not like what was recorded in the ancient books that were passed down to later generations. First of all, Di Shang could be said to be the first person to break the concept of class. As long as a slave was capable enough, Di Shang could allow him to hold an important position. Those nobles with noble bloodlines, if they were not capable enough, Di Shang would definitely not appoint them. Even gender was not that important in Di Shang's eyes. Compared to the stories of female generals like Hua Mulan that were fabricated, Di Shang had a female general like Fu Hao in this dynasty. Secondly, Di Shang did not believe in the system of God's bestowal of monarchs. Even the Zhou rights requirement of seniority was not worth mentioning in Di Shang's eyes. Queen Jiang had 2 sons, but none of them were successful. If they ascended the throne, they would definitely become the son of heaven and not the human king. Therefore, Di Shang wanted to appoint Wu Geng, who was born by Daji, as the crown prince. During the Shang dynasty, Di Shang's action could be said to have offended the upper class. Daji was not the demon concubine that was later sung. Instead, she was concubine Xian, who had made countless contributions to the Shang dynasty. Taking a closer look at what the officials of the Shang dynasty did, they were all eating the rice of the Shang dynasty, but they repeatedly helped the feudal lords to rebel. Bai Gan and the others were all traitors. On the contrary, Fei Lian and Heir Lai, who were known as traitors, accompanied Di Shang to the end of their lives and had never betrayed him. Loyalty and treachery could be seen at a glance. However, history was a little girl who could be dressed by anyone. That was why many people misunderstood the people of that period. More importantly, anyone who had participated in the investiture of God's tribulation knew how crazy Di Shang was at the end of the war. The Zhou dynasty would only record that the marquises rose up to support King Wen of Zhou and King Wu of Zhou. However, they did not mention in detail what the Yinshang had done to make so many marquises support a poor and destitute West Qi. They would only record that Dxan was raped at Jiaxing Tower. However, they would not tell the later generations about the huge loss that Dxin had brought to the Zhou dynasty. Similarly, they would not record that if Dxin's two sons had not betrayed him and opened the city gate to welcome the allied forces of the marquises into Jianghu, Dxin could have defeated the allied forces of the marquises without shedding any blood. However, when people studied this period of history, they would always find something strange. For example, the people of the Shang dynasty would rather die than eat a grain of rice of the Zhou dynasty. Many people did not even consider themselves as people of the Zhou dynasty, but called themselves the remnants of the Shang dynasty. There was also Di Shang's son Wu Geng. Why didn't GFA dare to kill Wu Geng when the Shang dynasty was destroyed? Instead, he gave Wu Geng a fief and made Wu Geng a feudal lord? If Wu Geng's ability was not as good as Di Shang's, the Zhou dynasty would never have the fortune of 800 years. Did Di Shang sleep in Jiaxing Lu because he was afraid of being judged by the Zhou dynasty? Wrong. Di Shang's sleep in Jiaxing Lu was not because he was afraid of the judgment of the Zhou dynasty. On the other hand, it was the most powerful counterattack of a human king against a group of traitors at the last moment. If Di Shang did not rape, Wu Geng would not have lived to the next day. The rulers of the Zhou dynasty never dared to call themselves emperors. Compared to human kings like Di Qi, Diyu, and Di Shang who used emperor as the prefix, the rulers of the Zhou dynasty always called themselves kings. Chapter 1151. Setting aside the mythological background, the reason why West Qi dared to rebel was that during the Little Ice Age, Dxin could only continue to expand to the south, which was warmer, to pursue a better place to live and more food for his people. Therefore, the main force of the Shang dynasty had been expanding to the south. After eliminating the tribes in the south, they also assumed the responsibility of guarding the land. Therefore, almost all the people that Dxin brought back to Jianghu were wounded soldiers or slaves. In the first battle with the rebels, it was also because of these slaves' rebellion that Dxin suffered a loss and had to retreat to Jianghu. Although Lin Yuan was not born in that era, he knew the power of Dxin's retreat to Jianghu. At that time, Jianghu was the capital of the Shang dynasty, but it was also a war fortress against North Di and Dongyi. If Dxin retreated to Jianghu, the rebels would not be able to break through the city walls in a short time. This hit the key point of West Qi. What kind of place was West Qi? To put it nicely, it was a paradise that did not close the door at night and did not pick up lost things on the road. To put it bluntly, it was poor. West Qi could not even feed its own army. In addition, the rebellions of the feudal lords all over the country were nominally led by West Qi. There were also the southern slaves who rebelled from Dxin's army. Therefore, West Qi really could not afford to feed people and horses. On the contrary, Dxin, who had developed the south, had a large amount of food stored in Jianghu. Therefore, as long as Dxin refused to fight, it was equivalent to winning the war and waiting for the rebels to collapse. In the end, the two sons of Queen Jiang and Weizi, who had failed to compete with Dxin for the throne, opened the strong city gate of Jianghu without hesitation, making all of Dxin's schemes a joke. The two sons of Weizi and Dxin were probably complacent, thinking that they would become the new nobles of the Zhou dynasty. However, the fate of these people was directly erased from the records of the Zhou dynasty. After all, they couldn't possibly say that they couldn't defeat Dxin and that it was thanks to the betrayal of the traitors that they were able to establish the Zhou dynasty, right? In a novel like The Investiture of the Gods, it was still alright. At the very least, these people were given an ending where they became gods. However, in the official history of the Zhou dynasty, they defeated the tyrant King Di of Shang by relying on their brilliance and domineering aura. These traitors had no part in it at all. After going through all this information in his mind, his first reaction was, King Shang isn't dead. His second reaction was, Yu Jiang was playing a trick? The relationship between Dxin and Hongjun could be described as irreconcilable. Even if Hongjun was one with the way of heaven, so what? He was unpopular. Not to mention that the three emperors were guarding the Fire Cloud Cave, Empress Pingxin in the netherworld had wanted to kill Hongjun for a long time. These things were not over yet. The Grand Elder abolished his status as a sage of the Way of Heaven and became a sage of the Great Tao. The Grandmaster of Heaven schemed against Hongjun and transcended the untainted land. The origin of the Way of Heaven in the incarnation system had also been stirring up trouble. Although Hongjun was indeed very strong, it was inevitable that two fists could not defeat four hands. He tried his best to suppress the appearance of the human Tao in the tunnel in order to maintain this high-pressure ruling status. If DXN really completed all the plans and promoted Wu Geng, who had been cultivated into a talent, to the throne when he died of old age, it was estimated that the human Tao would appear prominently before the third-generation successor could ascend the throne. At that time, the 3 emperors and 5 sovereigns would appear and cooperate with the Grand Elder and the others to kill Hongjun. Even if they could not kill him, it would not be a problem to beat him into the void and completely lose the ruling power of the untainted land. Therefore, the existence of DXN was a thorn in Hongjun's side and a thorn in his flesh. When the investiture of gods began, those untainted land creatures who were unwilling to obey Hongjun's rule might escape. However, it was absolutely impossible for DXN to escape from Hongjun's eyes. If Hongjun, who was one with the Way of Heaven, could not even do such a small thing, he would have been killed by other untainted land creatures long ago. Therefore, DXN must be dead. Even if DXN was still alive, it was impossible for him to mix with Jianghu, who had abandoned the human tribe and cultivated the method of the Western sect. DXN was an existence that could be ranked as one of the 3 emperors and 5 sovereigns. Whether it was the so-called Son of Heaven later on or the traitorous son of Jianghu, who was a descendant of the human king but abandoned the human tribe, they were all existences that DXN could not wait to kill. Boom. A figure walked out of the void. Almost at the moment he appeared, he had already raised his halberd and smashed it out, directly breaking the long stick in Bada's hand that was condensed from the power of incense. However, the terrifying power did not stop. The halberd smashed Bada more than 1,000 feet away before he could stop. Even with Bada's strong physical body, his sternum had collapsed and he was gasping for air. His hair was tied up by a golden crown, and he was wearing a chain of armor. He was wearing a red robe with dragons on the outside and a purple robe on the inside. His waist was tied with a battle skirt that depicted walking beasts. In addition, he was holding a sky piercer in his hand and a bronze bell hanging on his waist. When Lin Yuan saw the other party's attire, he had already determined the other party's identity. It was indeed related to DXIN. However, it was not DXIN himself. It was DXIN's second son, the second prince of Yinshang Yinhong. What a waste of the name DXN. Shangqing Heavenly Lord's expression turned cold as he stared coldly at Yinhong, who had defeated Batu in one move. Although the human tribe was the main character of the Eldritch world, in the eyes of the almighty figures, it was actually nothing much. Before the human tribe became the main character of the world, there were the innate fiend gods, the 3 races of dragon and phoenix and Kirin, as well as the witches and demons. These races were once the main characters of the world. However, these races were born strong and were feared by Hongjun. He used some means to exterminate and decline them. In addition, although the human tribe was born weak, they were indeed hard-working. The sect master of Rin School, the Grand Supreme and Yuhua who had created the human tribe endorsed them, did not have much impact on Hongjun's rule. Therefore, they were designated as the main characters of the world by Hongjun. However, no one would have thought that they had underestimated the human tribe in the end. The 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors had created a brilliant era that was filled with legends. Natural disasters, man-made disasters, demons and ghosts could not destroy the human tribe. Instead, it made the human tribe become stronger and stronger after repeated setbacks. Especially when they were in the hands of DXIN, they almost used the power of Yinshang to declare war on the Qi refinement cultivators in the world. They kept challenging Hongjun's authority and finally forced the sages to take action personally before they could destroy Yinshang. DXIN was one of the few human tribe that I, Tong Tian, valued and admired in my life. Yinhong was just a traitor. First, he betrayed Yinshang because he was dissatisfied that DXIN wanted to pass the throne to Wu Geng. Later on, he believed Shen Gongbao's words and betrayed Chan's school. He even almost injured Qi Jingzi who had passed on his abilities and Dharma treasures. Even Huang Feihu who had once let him off was captured by him in an attempt to dominate Yinshang. How could such a scum be given the name DXN? Chapter 1152. The moment he saw Yinhong, Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a hint of seriousness. Putting aside Yinhong's character, What was certain was that Yin Hong was definitely capable. After all, he was the son of a king. After DXN decided to make Wu Gung the crown prince, Yin Jiao and Yin Hong were heavily nurtured by the Xianmen. Not only did they learn a lot of skills, but they were also given a large number of magic treasures. From the looks of it, Yin Hong had brought all these magic treasures over. The Sky Piercer was not considered powerful in the investiture of the gods' tribulation, but it was definitely not an ordinary weapon. After all, it could fight with the weapons of so many powerful people. If it was an ordinary weapon, it would have been shattered long ago. Needless to say, the chain armor and the battle skirt were most likely good items. More importantly, the purple ribbon immortal robe he wore underneath the red robe was a treasure given by Qijingzi. After wearing it, one could be said to be invulnerable. Although it was not as powerful as the Supreme's heaven and earth exquisite black and yellow pagoda, it could not be broken by ordinary means. Not to mention, there was also a bronze bell hanging on Yin Hong's waist. It was probably the water and fire edge that appeared in the investiture of the gods. It was also a magic treasure of immortals that could be used to protect oneself. Good fellow Lin Yuan thought to himself. He was an expert. Although later generations commented that Yin Hong's ability was not good and that he only relied on his magic treasures to be fierce, taking a closer look at Yin Hong's outfit, he was already in an invincible position before he fought with others. If he could beat them, he would smash them with the Sky Piercer. If he could not beat them, he would use the Yin-Yang mirror. No wonder Qijingzi, who taught him skills, suffered under Yin Hong's hands. So what if he relied on his magic treasures to be fierce? You don't allow him to use his magic treasures? Dragon King, you're very capable. I've learned a lot. Yin Hong stared at the Black Jiao with a smile, but it was a fake smile. His eyes were cold as if he was looking at a corpse. The reputation of the Black Jiao in the northern frontier was indeed not fake. Obviously, each of the three schools of Buddhism, Taoism and Confucianism had produced an expert. In addition, he had also appeared in Yujiang. At most, he could find someone to hold back the two new deities of the northern frontier. It was a story of 3 against 1. Even if this Black Jiao was more formidable, could he really overturn the heavens? Is the prime of Tongtian powerful enough? In the investiture of the gods' cataclysm, he fought against 4 heavenly sages by himself, but he was still utterly defeated. Lin Yuan also replied with a fake smile and said jokingly, I thought it was really the human king DXN who had come. I was still looking forward to it. I didn't expect it to be the second prince of the Shang dynasty. I wonder if your highness Chen Sui has come to the northern frontier personally. What can I do for you? You. Yin Hong's face turned cold. His qi cultivation had almost been broken. The secular world always liked to curry favor. For example, calling the emperor long live or the prince long live. Although these people could not live for 1,000 years, at least it sounded comfortable. It was also a very common method of flattery. But the problem was that such a title was not flattery in the cultivation world. It was pointing at the nose and scolding people. Although Yin Hong was not a daluo of the origin and could not live as long as the heaven and earth, he still had a certain cultivation. In the untainted world, when one cultivated to the 3 realms of earthly immortal, divine immortal and genuine immortal, one's lifespan was already immeasurable. It was just that every period of time, there would be a tribulation. 3 calamities and 9 disasters, and the 5 decay of heaven and man would have to go through once every period of time. If one survived, he would live a carefree life, but if not, he would die and his soul would be destroyed. Even a sage to be at the peak would have to obediently go through the tribulation. Unless one became a daluo and transcended all things, or a sage of a certain path, there was no such thing as an immortal sage. But how long was a period of time? A period of time was 18,000 years, and a period of time was 129,600 years. A period of time was commonly known as a period of time, which was to multiply the 2 numbers. That was to say, as long as one cultivated to the realm of true immortal, even if he could not go through the first tribulation, he could live for about 1 billion years. Although Yin Hong had not reached the realm of true immortal, he was still an immortal. With all his magic treasures, he could easily live for billions of years. Now he was called Your Highness Long Live by Black Jiao, which was no different from Black Jiao pointing at his nose and scolding him as a short-lived ghost. What's more, Yin Hong was also a famous person on the list of deification. He was the lord of 5 grains of the fighting sect and usually lived in the heavenly court. Hao Yin had once refined the star banner left by the ancient demon court and set up the cosmic stars formation. Even in the untainted world, the flow of time in the heavenly court was different from that in the mortal world. As the saying went, 1 day in the heavenly court was 1 year on the earth. If Yin Hong stayed in the heavenly court, his lifespan would be even longer. In the cultivation world, you could point at someone's nose and scold them, but you could never say that they had a short life. As everyone knew, the so-called cultivation was actually fighting against the heavens. If you turned your head and threw it out, 9 out of 10 cultivators were trying to attain immortality. Scolding others for having a short life was much more ruthless than robbing others of their opportunities and treasures. In other words, you were ruining their Taoist heart. Bastard! How dare you bully me? The killing intent in Yin Hong's eyes soared. His body turned into a shadow almost instantly. Just like when he appeared at the beginning, he also came in front of Lin Yuan in an instant. The sky piercer in his hand smashed down. His momentum was so strong that it was like a killing star had appeared. Go! Bu Xingzhou, who had been confronting Lin Yuan, saw the appearance of a strong helper, and his face was immediately filled with joy. He was originally worried that this fierce person who suddenly appeared would casually exchange a few words with the Black Jiao and then lead Yu Jiang away. However, he didn't expect that although the Black Jiao recognized the other party's identity, he didn't give the other party any face at all. Instead, he mocked him as soon as he opened his mouth. This caused the other party to not even have the chance to say the trash talk that he had prepared. He was provoked to the point that he directly attacked. However, even this mocking sentence made many people envious. Cultivation was easy to enter, but the Great Tao was difficult to achieve. This had never been an empty sentence. As for cultivation, as long as one didn't have a naturally terminated meridian and a physique that couldn't absorb the spirit chi of heaven and earth, one could casually obtain a cultivation method and complete the mortal evolution realm that was similar to a mortal martial artist. However, among these cultivators, those who could reach the airborne realm were considered geniuses. Those who could reach the Heaven Star Border realm and Kongming realm were even more rare. Although the Heavenly Gate Guardian's power was incomparably huge, this group of people was understaffed no matter what they did. They had to cultivate their power in the 7 empires. From this point alone, it could be seen how scarce the Heavenly Gate Guardian's members were. A lifespan of 1,000 years was actually not long. According to the increase in lifespan of the Jianghu world's cultivation realm, a Heaven Star Border realm cultivator would have a lifespan of at least 800 to 900 years or even 1,000 years. However, even so, it was already not bad if 1 out of 10,000 cultivators could reach the Heaven Star Border realm. To some people, 1,000 years was scolding them for having a short life. However, to others, it was difficult to pursue in their lifetime. Chapter 1153. Lin Yuan was slightly startled by Yin Hong's sudden outburst, and then he smiled with relief. His Highness Chen Sui was not a casual name. In the Investiture of the Gods, there was a scene where Yin Hong went down the mountain to recruit the 4 generals, and the 4 generals directly called Yin Hong His Highness Chen Sui. However, for Yin Hong, who had just started cultivating at that time, His Highness Chen Sui was still a respectful name, not a curse. But now, after countless years of Investiture of the Gods, calling Yin Hong His Highness Chen Sui was really a curse for his short life. Besides, Yin Shang had perished, so how could Yin Hong still be a highness? But since he had said it, the Dragon King also cared about his reputation, so he would not change his words or make any explanation. To put it bluntly, it was, I am cursing you, so what? If the 2 traitors Yin Hong and Yin Jiao hadn't opened the gate of Zhaoge and led the army of Shiqi into the city, human Dao would have become popular in a few decades. At that time, the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors as well as Dxian and later Qin Huang and Han Wu, human Dao would be so prominent that even the Way of Heaven couldn't cover it. How could the untainted world be dominated by Hong Jun alone? Regardless of his identity as a human, Lin Yuan hated traitors the most in his life. If there was a chance, Lin Yuan really didn't intend to let any of them go. With a thought, for shadows of ancient long swords condensed around Lin Yuan, and a shocking evil spirit and murderous aura suddenly spread out. Yin Hong, who had attacked in anger, suddenly had a change in expression. He forcibly withdrew his sky piercer in midair, and his figure flashed hundreds of miles away. He stared at the 4 long sword phantoms around Lin Yuan with a face full of fear. This bastard doesn't care about martial virtues. The natives of the Jianghu world didn't recognize the 4 ancient swords, but how could Yin Hong not recognize them? Why did the sect of Jie dare to challenge the 3 sects of human, Chan, and Western at the same time, and fight against the 4 sages alone? This was because the prime of Tong Tian had mastered the 4 immortal slaying swords. Once he formed the immortal slaying sword array, even the 6 saints would have to avoid it. Although he could see that the 4 ancient swords around Black Jiao were not real, The problem was that he did not have the Tree of Seven Wonders or the exquisite pagoda to fight against the immortal slaying sword formation. After all, he was the son of the human king and had experienced a calamity. He had also served as the 5-grain star sovereign of the Heavenly Court's battle division for many years. He definitely did not lack battle experience. Therefore he retreated almost instantly and stared at Black Jiao with a face full of fear. He could take a gamble, but the problem was that the yin-yang mirror had already been taken back by red essence. The fire and water edge and the 8 trigrams purple ribbon immortal robe on him were replicas that he had hired with his salary after becoming an official of the heavenly courts. They were naturally not as powerful as the original. Even if he used them, they could only withstand 2 ancient swords at most. The remaining 2 ancient swords were enough to kill him. Fortunately, there was still a reckless person who dared to make use of him to attack Black Jiao. "It's time for you to test the power of the immortal slaying sword array for me." In an instant Yin Hong's mind was full of thoughts. Although his face was still gloomy, there was a faint trace of fear in his eyes. "This is bad. You scoundrel." Bu Xingzhou saw Yin Hong's face filled with fear as he retreated. How could he not understand that the Black Flood Dragon's 4 sword shadows were so powerful that even this ferocious person who had suddenly appeared was afraid? However, he didn't have Yin Hong's ability. Plus, he had never seen how powerful the Banishing Immortal Sword formation was. He only thought it was one of the Black Flood Dragon's methods. When he saw Yin Hong retreat, it was too late for him to retreat. He could only charge into the Banishing Immortal Sword formation with a face full of anger. "Oh, you want to see? I won't let you see." Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed and he spat out a green ball of light from his mouth. It was the willow branch bestowed by Patriarch Yang Mei. The willow branch spun in a circle and immediately locked the space, enveloping the immortal slaying sword array within. No matter how much outsiders tried to pry, they would not be able to see how powerful the sword array was to be able to make a hidden danger, a fierce person who had severely injured the god of war of the northern frontier, retreat. However, other than Shangqing Tianzuan and Taoist Red Cloud, who had unfathomable cultivation, no one noticed that a small black dot that was almost no different from a speck of dust suddenly emerged from the crack in the void when the willow branch sealed the space. The 6 pairs of blood wings on its back flapped and it completely disappeared without a trace. Shangqing Tianzuan's expression changed. Just as he was about to make a move, he saw a jade-like right hand hit his shoulder. He turned his head and saw Taoist Red Cloud's smiling face. "Senior brother, one of the 50 escapes from the heavens divination. This is Black Jiao's tribulation. No matter how deep your hatred is, you should not interfere." As Taoist Red Cloud spoke, the smile on his face became deeper and deeper. He whispered, "If you want to change the heavens design, call your original self here." Shangqing Tianzuan's movement paused slightly. Suddenly he smiled and said, "I was wrong. Thank you, junior brother, for your advice." Mosquito Daoran was also an expert who cultivated the great way of space. At his peak he was even at the sage-to-be level. He was only 1 step away from Zenith Heaven. It was very reasonable for him to seize this opportunity to escape. Whether it was Shangqing Tianzuan, Taoist Red Cloud, or Lin Yuan, all of them should have thought of this. However, Lin Yuan still used the willow branch. Obviously he had other plans. If Shangqing Tianzuan acted rashly, he might fall into the Black Jiao's trap. "Haha, it's okay. Taoist Red Cloud smiled meaningfully. He waved his hand as if he did not care and said, "We are all guests of the Purple Cloud Palace. You're also my senior brother. If you can help, I will naturally not refuse. Since senior brother has seen through it, I will not stay for long. I'm leaving." As soon as he finished speaking, Taoist Red Cloud dispersed into wisps of red mist and dissipated in front of Shangqing Tianzuan. Shangqing Tianzuan touched his head with a puzzled look in his eyes. He murmured, "Why do I feel that although I was not tricked by Black Jiao, I was tricked by Taoist Red Cloud?" After a while, Shangqing Tianzuan blushed and patted his head. He scolded, "Damn it. If it was not for Mosquito Daoran, that bastard, running in front of me, how could I lose my composure like this? I am so angry." Taoist Red Cloud and Shangqing Tianzuan had unknowingly fought once. However, it did not affect the battle between Lin Yuan and Yin Hong. When Yin Hong saw the phantoms of the 4 immortal slaying swords, he was a little scared. After all, the immortal slaying swords formation was too powerful. However, now that he saw a piece of willow branch, Yin Hong was so shocked that he could not help but take a few steps back. There were many powerful figures in the untainted world. However, there were only a few who were especially ruthless. Hongjun, Sanqing and the like were well known. However, there was one more powerful figure who could make Hongjun suffer in silence. The hollow willow branch, the ancestor Yang Mei. She could be said to have deduced the great Tao of space to the extreme. She could even fight with Hongjun, who was in harmony with the great Tao of heaven. Chapter 1154. The ancestor of Yang Mei was a true origin Daluo. No matter which world he went to, he would be a saint. Moreover, there were differences between saints. For example, Hongjun was also a heavenly path saint, but he could firmly suppress the 6 heavenly sages for countless years. First, he fought a great battle with the ancestor of Yang Mei in the River of Time. Although countless magic treasures were taken away, he still severely injured the ancestor of Yang Mei, forcing the ancestor of Yang Mei to escape into the Sea of Bitterness. The 3 sovereigns were even more miserable. They could only guard the Fire Cloud Cave to barely ensure that they would not be killed by Hongjun. Empress Pingxin was also suppressed in the Netherworld, unable to interfere with the heavenly realm and the mortal realm. Even the authority of the underworld had been seized by various almighty figures. The ancestor of Yang Mei and the ancestor of Hongjun were peerless, ferocious figures at the top of the food chain no matter which world they were in. The Black Jiao was powerful, but the current Black Jiao was probably not even an earth immortal in the untainted world. The only reason he could fight against him was because the Qinwu world was only a small kiliacosm and he could not use his full strength. How could such an ant hurt the ancestor of Yang Mei and even pluck a willow branch from the ancestor of Yang Mei? So obviously, this willow branch was personally bestowed by the ancestor of Yang Mei. Hiss. Thinking of this, Yin Hong could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. What the hell was the Black Jiao's background? The fate of the northern frontier was as heavy as a mountain. Obviously, it was blessed by the heavens. All the cultivators who belonged to the northern frontier were blessed by the heavens. Once they started cultivating, not only would their cultivation speed far exceed that of cultivators in other regions, even their bottlenecks and inner demons would be much weaker. Otherwise, the northern frontier would not have been able to cultivate such a terrifying army of cultivators in less than 3 years after its establishment. In addition, the sword shadow of the immortal slaying sword formation could not be summoned by just anyone. This guy might have some connection with sect leader Tong Tian. According to sect leader Tong Tian's personality of teaching without discrimination, the Black Dragon might be a disciple of the tribe of Jie, or even a disciple personally accepted by that person. In terms of seniority, he could be considered a second-generation disciple of the tribe of Jie. Then shouldn't he have to call him martial uncle? Furthermore, he had a section of ancestor Yang Mei's willow branch. Whether it was capturing or controlling people, he was probably much more powerful than his master Qi Jingzi's school of Yin Yang. Was he still a human? Was there any law? Who was he? Grandson of the Yellow Emperor. Who was he? Son of Dxian. Even if 2 descendants of the human king were put together, they might not be as rich as the Black Jiao. The layman watched the show while the expert watched the skill. There was nothing more than this. Originally, Yin Hong was still full of anger. However, after seeing Lin Yuan's background, he suddenly did not want to take action. After all, the Black Jiao's background was really difficult to guess. Just by showing this willow branch, there were less than 5 people in the 4 seas of the untainted land who dared to clamor with Lin Yuan. A cold light flashed in Lin Yuan's blue and white eyes. He took back the willow branch again. The 4 ancient sword shadows floated beside him. Then a pile of minced meat fell from the sky. When it fell to the ground, it had already become a pile of meat paste. No one would have thought that this pile of meat paste was a big shot at the level of a transcendent, not long ago. Among the experts who spied on the northern frontier, the heterodox sects were still fine. The 3 sects of Buddhism, Taoism and Confucianism all sighed with regret. Good heavens, 3 transcendent experts came to the northern frontier to find trouble with the Black Jiao. In the end they were all wiped out. Song Shuebuo was the one who died the most beautifully. At least his corpse was left intact. Look at the divine monk Kong Xiang. At this moment only his head was left, which had nothing to do with holiness or mercy. Taoism's Buxing Zhou was even more miserable. He had become a pile of meat paste on the ground. It was estimated that he could not be picked up completely. The guardians of the heavenly gate, who were already few in number, were now in an even worse situation. The Buddhist, Taoist and Confucian sects who had to join forces to fight against the demon sect, would probably have a harder time in the future. More importantly, after this battle, who would dare to establish a sect in the territory of the northern region? The Black Jiao had already said that they would either split their sects into various aristocratic families and follow the rules of the northern frontier, or they would directly scram out of the Jianghu continent and establish their own sects on the islands of the Endless Sea. They would obediently become his overseas immortal sects. There were also some sects who relied on the fact that they had the support of the guards of the Heavenly Gate and refused to leave the Central Plains or the south of the Shenwu dynasty. They even took the opportunity to seize territory. It was obvious that they wanted to become feudal lords and compete with the northern frontier to see who would replace the Shenwu dynasty as the 7th dynasty. Now everything was fine. There was no more suspense. Not leaving? You can try if you don't want to leave. Many cultivation forces began to have ideas about the Yingtian temple. After all, everyone knew that the Yingtian temple had been lacking in manpower for so many years. Its strength was at most at the upper level of a second-rate force. Now it had even offended the Black Jiao of the northern frontier. Even the Immortal Supreme, who was the only one who could shoulder the responsibility after the founder of the sect, was chopped into a pile of meat by the Black Jiao. Didn't this mean that the Yingtian temple was now a piece of fat meat that anyone could take a bite out of? Whether it was the forces that had already decided to disband their sects and split them into aristocratic families or the forces that continued to be stubborn and insisted on competing with the northern frontier for the position of overlord, at this moment, they had already begun to mobilize their forces and were ready to eat the fat meat that was the Yingtian temple. Whether it was to form a good relationship with the northern frontier or to occupy this territory for themselves, the prerequisite was to destroy the Yingtian temple. The phantoms of the 4 immortal swords returned to their positions. Lin Yuan did not even look at Yin Hong and Yu Jiang. He only squinted his eyes and sized up the Severing Thunder Branch. The Severing Thunder Branch was indeed a good treasure. However, it had been refined by Bu Xingzhou for many years and was completely tied to the fate of the Yingtian temple. If the Yingtian temple became stronger and stronger, the Severing Thunder Branch would also become stronger and stronger. However, if the Yingtian temple was destroyed, the Severing Thunder Branch could only collapse on its own and become a useless pitch-black wooden stick. Might even turn into powder. What a pity, Lin Yuan said with some regret. Although he did not rely on the enhancement of magic treasures, he would not refuse if there was a magic treasure that could be used. The Severing Thunder Branch was a magic treasure that was quite compatible with him. Summoning the wind and summoning the rain was originally the signature skill of the dragon race. In addition, the Severing Thunder Branch could be enhanced in thunderstorms. It could be said that with this treasure, Lin Yuan could create a battlefield where he could become stronger and stronger at any time. Unfortunately, the Dragon King was such a demon who meant what he said. If he said that he would not give any sects a place to survive, then he would not change his words. Moreover, he had previously said that he would destroy the entire Yingtian temple. Is it possible for Lin Yuan to slap his own face? That was obviously impossible. After sighing with emotion, Lin Yuan turned his gaze to Yin Hong and said with a smile, "Your Highness Chen Sui, why did you retreat? Since you have made up your mind to cause trouble for the northern frontier, then, continue." Chapter 1155. Heh. Yin Hong laughed coldly. He waved the halberd in his hand and said in a deep voice, "I have experienced Dragon King's strength. However, is the Dragon King sure that he wants to shed all pretenses of cordiality at this time? Even if the Dragon King wins today's battle, he will need more than 10 years to recuperate. Don't let others take advantage of us." When he finished speaking, many spectators felt their faces twitch. Similarly, Yin Hong did not want to clash head-on with Lin Yuan. However, Yin Hong's level was clearly much higher than that of Yu Jiang and Bu Xingzhou. It was still an unsolved mystery how strong the Black Jiao was when he became serious. Furthermore, the methods of Yin Hong and Yu Jiang, 2 top-notch experts whose identities were unknown, could not be predicted. If both parties fought to the death, it would be very troublesome no matter who the victor was. In particular, the Black Jiao from the northern frontier was currently in a period of strength. Once he was severely injured at this time, many people would start to target the northern frontier. If they were in his shoes, many top-notch experts felt that they would have to compromise with him. The comprehensive strength of the northern frontier far surpassed that of any of the empires. In fact, with the existence of Lin Yuan, Batu, and Kagura, their foundation would not be inferior to any of the powers other than the Heavenly Gates Protectors. Even the Heavenly Gates Protectors was essentially an alliance. In private, there were countless independent top-notch powers. Currently, the northern frontier had the qualifications to be called a top-notch power. It was an existence that the empires could not compare to. More importantly, the powerful rise of the northern frontier had touched the sensitive nerves of many people. Even though the northern frontier was the only powerful power now, they were certain that once the northern frontier started to exert its power and destroyed the structure of the seven empires, countless people and powers who had previously restrained themselves for various reasons would jump out and try to divide up this sweet cake. Of course, it would be best if they could monopolize it. The reason why the seven empires were able to become rules-based existences was mainly because the various powers kept each other in check and wrestled with each other. In the end, a blueprint that seemed very fair was finally drawn out. However, in reality, the various powers were no longer satisfied with the seven empires being divided and ruled. This could be seen from the constant collisions and killings between the neighboring empires. They ate from their own bowls and stared at other people's pots. This was not a matter of a day or two. In the past, no one had stepped forward to do this because of a tragedy that all reformers had to face, becoming enemies with the world. For example, Qin Shi Huang had swept through the 6 states and started the reform of writing and writing. As he had affected the interests of too many people, his evaluation had repeatedly jumped between that of a great emperor and that of a tyrannical tyrant. For example, Emperor Yang of the Sui dynasty Yang Guang was known as an expert in economics. Regardless of whether it was in political or military affairs, he was much more outstanding than his peers later on. However, because he had affected the interests of too many people, he was almost criticized as the first incapable ruler in history. What the northern frontier was doing now was actually similar. Perhaps it was not that great, but there was one thing that was the same: it had affected the interests of too many people. Almost everyone with a discerning eye could see that the northern frontier was able to maintain absolute suppression today. Firstly, it was because Lin Yuan's reforms in the northern frontier had indeed brought about a huge increase. For example, the nationalization of land directly cut off the roots of the aristocratic families, the opening of the Northern Frontier Academy, and the destruction of the sect's rice bowls. If one only talked about it, perhaps anyone could do it. However, if one really did it, one would have to pay a huge price. In fact, everyone was well aware of it. Not to mention the counterattacks from the sects and aristocratic families, and the hostility from the other dynasties, the investment in the northern frontier alone had reached a terrifying astronomical figure. Even though the northern frontier had the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, which was a gold-swallowing beast that even the Heavenly Gate formation was envious of, the northern frontier could still be described as poor. The teachers and students of the Northern Frontier Academy, as well as the officials and soldiers of the various government offices and army in the northern frontier, were all supported by the northern frontier. This was not something that the other dynasties could compare with by giving out salaries. This was because no dynasty dared to say that all the cultivators or good seedlings who had the intention to cultivate under their rule would be provided by them as long as they were willing to cooperate. In less than 3 years, the resources invested in the northern frontier were enough to support 2 first-rate sects and still be rich. But then again, was this policy of the northern frontier wrong? Obviously not. Looking at the current northern frontier, there was an endless stream of talents in all aspects. Even if there were no suitable talents locally, there would be an endless stream of talented people from other dynasties coming to seek refuge. Even some of the sects and aristocratic families that were said to be sworn enemies of the northern frontier had secretly sent many people to the northern frontier to take up positions. Moreover, they did their best and did not hide their incompetence at all. To these aristocratic families and sects, this was actually considered a basic operation. After all, they also needed to survive, especially when chaos was about to arrive. It was even more necessary to place bets separately. No one dared to say that the person they chose would definitely win. No matter how confident they were in their own judgment, they had to consider carefully. The price of placing all their bets was the extermination of their family. Just like the period of the 3 kingdoms, the Wei, Shu and Wu kingdoms all had Zhuge family members. Even if one did not know much about the 3 kingdoms and only knew of Zhuge Liang, but after careful calculation, the Zhuge family in Wei and Wu kingdoms actually had many people who were officials. Some of them even had extremely high statuses. And the Zhuge family was just a microcosm of the aristocratic families of the 3 kingdoms. And these aristocratic families and sects disciples who came to the northern frontier might not be comparable to Zhuge Liang or Sima Yi, but their abilities were not inferior in the slightest. Since they had decided to place their bets on the northern frontier, they would not allow some defective goods to ruin their reputation. Therefore, some people said that they could not live under the same sky as the northern frontier, but it was possible that some of the mainstays of the northern frontier were sent by them. Regarding this, everyone including Lin Yuan was well aware of it. The northern frontier could be said to be the enemy of the entire world, and Lin Yuan's series of actions had not only allowed the northern frontier to live in such a situation, but even vaguely had the potential to dominate the Jianghu continent. But the most important thing was, they could not stop. Once the northern frontier stopped moving, it would definitely not be a situation where everyone would be fine. To put it bluntly, who knew how many powers were waiting for the northern frontier to fall? Once the northern frontier fell, they would immediately pounce like jackals and wolves, devouring the remains of the northern frontier. Ah! Lin Yuan also chuckled as he looked at Yin Hong with a calm gaze. His expression was somewhat playful. But he did not immediately open his mouth to speak, causing many people to be on tenterhooks. Some were worried, some were excited. All kinds of emotions were displayed vividly at this moment. Chapter 1156. Looks like you're very confident in your own strength. Lin Yuan's lips curled into a grin as he looked at Yin Hong with a gloomy gaze. Almost at the same time, Yin Hong and Yu Zhang's expressions changed. Although Lin Yuan didn't remove the fig leaf, his attitude was very obvious. You Yin Hong are confident in your own strength? Are you saying that I, Lin Yuan, am a pushover? Lin Yuan stared at Yin Hong with scorching eyes and said coldly, this king's attitude has always been clear. I don't care who you are, who's behind you, whether you came to the northern frontier to join in the fun or deliberately came to the northern frontier to cause trouble. But since you're here, this king must make you pay the price. Otherwise, if outsiders find out, wouldn't they think that the northern frontier can do whatever they want? As soon as he said that, some people with ulterior motives immediately shrunk their necks. They had already made up their minds. If the northern frontier was only strong on the outside but weak on the inside, after Yu Jiang and Yin Hong left, they would find an excuse to cause trouble at the northern frontier. Moreover, when the Black Jiao really got angry and they did this, could it be that the Black Jiao would really fight to the death with them? As if they were pushovers. But now, the Black Jiao had made his attitude clear. If they came to the northern frontier to cause trouble, they would have to pay the price. Rather than saying these words for Yin Hong and Yu Jiang, it was better to say that they were for the people with ulterior motives. Just like how some people always like to ride on popularity in traffic without any bottom line, if they ruthlessly stepped on the northern frontier, then the benefits for what they were going to do next could be said to be obvious with the naked eye. The most important thing was breaking the Black Jiao's invincibility. Invincibility was a mysterious thing, but when faced with it, not many people dared to say that they didn't care. It was like an ordinary person. If you asked him to start a business from scratch with Jack Ma, although the conditions were the same, the ordinary person would still have a certain amount of fear and worry in his heart. After all, Jack Ma's achievements and family business were there for all to see. Although it was said that even a pig could fly in the wind, reality had proven that a pig really couldn't stand in the wind. Instead, when it left the scene, it was already seen by countless butchers as a piece of fat meat under their butcher's knife. Ever since Lin Yuan had been born, it could be said that he had won every battle. Among them, there were ants who were so weak that they didn't even bother to remember their names, but there were also fierce people who made them feel fear. If they were in his shoes, even if they didn't go to the extent of turning pale at the mention of a flood dragon, who could guarantee that they would always be able to maintain a calm state and convince themselves that they would definitely win? Invincible momentum. This was a sharp blade that Lin Yuan had hung over the heads of all the natives of the sky martial world. Furthermore, as time passed, this sharp blade seemed to be getting sharper and sharper. In normal times, of course, they could ignore this sharp blade because normally they wouldn't have a conflict with the northern frontier. Even if there were some small conflicts, it would be between the people below them and the northern frontier. Like the southern wasteland's venerable monster, who had almost shed all pretenses of cordiality with Lin Yuan, also didn't run over to the northern frontier to start a massacre, right? Because in the world of cultivation, the outcome of a battle didn't decide anything. The only thing that could decide victory and defeat was the silent contest between the strongest of the two sides. Otherwise, even if you destroyed the other side's country in one battle, the other side's strongest would madly slaughter your subordinates. In a short period of time, the advantage that you had painstakingly built up would be completely destroyed. Therefore, not everyone was an idiot who didn't know that the northern frontier was too powerful and needed to be targeted. Instead, there wasn't a single power that dared to say that they could fight against the northern frontier alone. Even if they pulled in a few strong reinforcements, they might not necessarily be able to win. Just like what Yin Hong said, even if they won, they would have to recuperate for more than 10 years. At that time, they wouldn't even be able to eat the meat, and would instead become a piece of fat meat in the eyes of others. But what if they were able to pull in reinforcements until they could win against the northern frontier? The distribution of benefits seemed to be somewhat uneven. In the world of adults there were no fairy tales. Only benefits were the eternal and unchanging theme. If you pulled in a large group of people to fight against the northern frontier, you might not necessarily be able to win, then why couldn't the other side directly join forces with the northern frontier to eat you up? In the face of enough benefits, human nature was as fragile as a bubble that could be easily popped. Just like in the spring and autumn period and the warring states period, the 6 states joined forces to attack the Qin dynasty. It seemed to be a great show of force, and they forced the great Qin dynasty into a desperate situation. However, in the end, because of the uneven distribution of benefits, they parted on bad terms. As a result, the alliance became a joke. The Qin dynasty, which was forced into a desperate situation, became the ruler of the world from the Qin clan, which couldn't even be considered the Qin dynasty, and the first emperor appeared. In every chaotic era, it could be said that there were many talented people. Whether it was generals or strategists just randomly picking out a famous one, almost all of them had the foresight of the era. Some of the ancient systems were still used in Lin Yuan's era. Were these people fools? Couldn't they see the principles behind it? No, they could see it, but they still wanted to fight for their own or their own country's benefits. They didn't even hesitate to draw their swords against their allies. The current northern frontier was just like the Qin dynasty. It clearly had the power to surpass any dynasty, but if it followed the planned strategy of the northern frontier, it would instantly go from being the most threatening existence to being the least threatening existence. More importantly now, no dynasty was willing to go head-to-head with the northern frontier, because they would pay a price that they couldn't bear. Instead, it would let the other dynasties take advantage of it. As long as the northern frontier could maintain its strength, no power would dare to start a war with the northern frontier. Yin Hong and Yu Jiang looked at each other. Then Yin Hong suddenly raised the sky piercer in his hand. Just as he was about to activate his divine power, he suddenly paused and looked in the direction of Kagura in shock. This was because he suddenly realized that there was an existence in the northern frontier that overlapped with his priesthood. He was the star sovereign of the 5 grains of the Do tribe, also known as the god of the 5 grains. He was in charge of the growth of the grains. If he was determined to make the northern frontier pay the price, then the northern frontier would fall into a famine for a long time. When that time came, there would be no way to feed the people of the northern frontier, let alone expand outward. However, when he used his priesthood, he clearly felt a wave of helplessness. It was obvious that the priesthood in charge of the growth of grains had been taken by someone in the northern frontier. Some people in the Eldritch world said that the god of the 5 grains was the Yen Emperor, and Yin Hong didn't deny this. However, the two were not of the same system. No matter how capable the Yen Emperor was, he couldn't interfere with the governance of the heavenly court. Moreover, he couldn't play such tricks in the northern frontier under the nose of Kagura. Chapter 1157. Yin Hong's expression changed several times, but his reaction was extremely fast. He held the halberd with both hands and pressed it down. A terrifying power suddenly leaked out, and the world turned from bright to dark. It was as if this halberd smashing down would cause the world to collapse. Rumble. 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 Continuous tremors spread from where Yin Hong's halberd landed in all directions. Even more than 100,000 kilometers away, this thunder-like tremor could be faintly heard. Hear me. Lin Yuan's eyes widened as he suddenly roared. The pillar-like torrential rain and the puddles on the ground all rose out of thin air, forming a huge transparent hand in an instant and slamming toward the halberd. The two incomparably terrifying forces collided with each other, immediately causing countless spectators to tremble with fear. Because the halberd was actually unable to withstand such a terrifying force and broke apart at the first collision. That translucent hand was also completely scattered into splashes of water at this moment. However, everyone knew that no matter if it was the flying halberd fragments or the falling water, they all contained an unimaginable amount of divine force. They were far from being able to contend against an existence that was far from being able to contend against. Even the slightest bit of contact would be a path to death. Watching powerful beings fight had always been a convention in the cultivation world since ancient times. Of course, this wasn't because most cultivators had nothing to do and liked to go out and watch people fight. Instead, it was because watching powerful beings fight could often be used to comprehend things by analogy. It was beneficial to one's cultivation and state of mind. However, when it came to watching a battle, one had to know their own limits. When mortal evolution states fought, even mortals could watch. When airborne realm cultivators fought, mortals would be shocked to death even if they got close enough to hear the sounds of the two sides clashing, let alone just watching. In the northern frontier king's mansion, Li Zhong put his hands behind his back and looked at Lin Yuan and Yin Hong who had begun to fight. He said in a deep voice, "A great disaster is imminent. Don't bother to hide your strength. Activate the city protection formation immediately." As soon as his voice fell, the guards of the king's mansion immediately obeyed the order. Soon, a layer of golden light shrouded Shining City. Those halberd pieces and water streams only caused some ripples when they hit this layer of golden light. In addition, Lin Yuan was already able to eliminate the impact when he made his move. He tried his best to avoid the collision points that would hurt Shining City. Therefore the attacks weren't too dense. With the city protection formation newly developed by the Ministry of Works, it could barely withstand the attacks. Lin Yuan looked back at the activated Great City Barrier Array, and his heart was slightly at ease. He could also eliminate the impact of the aftermath of the battle on Shining City, but he didn't do so before. Even if he didn't like Yin Hong's character, he had to admit that Yin Hong did have some skills. If he were to fight him head-on, he might not be able to win. If he were to multitask at this time and care about the people of the northern frontier living in Shining City, then it would be hard to say who would win. More importantly, whether it was Yin Hong or Yu Jiang, they were not good people. If they thought that he would care about the lives of the people of the northern frontier, they would never hesitate. They might even put down their dignity as cultivators and attack the mortals, forcing Lin Yuan to save them. Then they would severely injure Lin Yuan. In the untainted world, good people couldn't survive, especially Yin Hong, who had a bad reputation and could even betray his own father for power. In addition, there was another person who could betray the human tribe and cultivate the Western religious sect in order to go further. If Lin Yuan didn't question their character, then Lin Yuan should question his own character. Yin Hong threw away the broken sky halberd and said with a sneer, "Lord Dragon King, you are so cold-hearted. You don't care about the people of Shining City behind you. It turns out that your previous performance was just a disguise." Lin Yuan didn't move and said with a sneer, "No wonder your father would rather choose Wuging, who is not talented, than pass the throne to you or your brother. You don't have a discerning eye. I didn't manage Shining City. Did you cause any damage to Shining City? Can you scare the people in the city to death?" Yin Hong's face twitched slightly and his eyes became bloodshot. At first glance, they looked like a pair of scarlet eyes. When Lin Yuan called him His Highness Chen Sui before, he only took it as an ordinary insult. Although the lifespan of a cultivator is generally not short, only a very small number of people who hide in their homes and cultivate on their own land can live to the end of their lives. Moreover, they must be very lucky and never encounter outsiders who come to find trouble. Most of the cultivators either die in the hands of other cultivators or under the claws and teeth of demon beasts. Even in the untainted world, similar things can be said to be everywhere. Therefore, even though he was angry when he was called short-lived, it was not too outrageous. In a sense, it was not wrong. Although Yin Hong was still alive, he was actually a spirit on the list of deification, which was similar to the existence of demons and monsters. It was just that his name sounded a little better. Not to mention that he was 1,000 years old. He was taken away by the clan of enlightenment to learn martial arts at the age of 12 or 13. Not long after he finished his martial arts and went down the mountain, he was persuaded by Shin Gongbao and finally died in the Tai Chi diagram. His muscles, bones, blood and flesh turned into ashes. It was true that he was short-lived. But Lin Yuan's words really poked at his sore spot. He never understood why his father chose Wuging, the worst of the three brothers. Both he and his elder brother were the sons of the king of Jiang and had the Jiang family behind them. They had help from both the government and the ordinary people. Moreover, he and his elder brother had never been idle or fighting. Instead, they had been studying all kinds of knowledge seriously. Until his death, he still couldn't figure out how they were inferior to Wuging. In Yin Hong's opinion, Wuging was a complete loser. After the Zhou dynasty destroyed the Shang dynasty, they still couldn't win the hearts of the remaining people of the Shang dynasty. And because DXN burned all the provisions, GFA couldn't move an inch. In the end, he had no choice but to make Wuging a duke and order him to manage the old land of the Shang dynasty and the remaining people of the Shang dynasty. But in fact, GFA was just helpless. If he was so generous, he wouldn't have made Uncle Guan, Uncle Kai and Uncle Hua build vassal states from the east, west and north to monitor Wuging together. Based on the situation of the Zhou dynasty at that time, it was simply impossible for them to bear another huge war. If Wu Geng was a wise lord, there would probably be no such thing as the Duke of Zhou's nourishment and the world's loyalty. It could be said that before Dxian died, he had even checkmated GFA. In the end, Wu Geng held a good hand and forcefully smashed it into pieces. Chapter 1158. In terms of results, Dxian should have lost. However, in a practical sense, Dxian was the biggest winner. This was because he almost single-handedly overthrew the theory of the right of kings and tried to get rid of Hongjuan's influence to establish humanity. Dxian did not burn himself to death at Jai Xinglu. He also burned the wealth that Yin Shang had accumulated over hundreds of years. This made GFA and Jiangxia, who originally dreamed of eating Zhaoge and eventually swallowing all the vassals in the world, so angry that they almost cried. Not only did they not dare to continue killing the remnants of Yin Shang and Crown Prince Wuging, they even gave Wuging territory and population, begging Wuging not to be stubborn and attack them. This was because the Zhou dynasty had no more money and food at that time. They could not afford to continue the war. If they continued to fight, no one would benefit. They would only be eaten by the other vassals. This was also why Lin Yuan admired Dxian the most. He used his own death to give GFA and the heavenly Tao that GFA represented the most fatal blow. He protected the people of Yin Shang and his own bloodline. Be it as a king or a father, he was outstanding. Even the people of Zhou dynasty who were used to beautifying themselves did not talk about this matter. This was because logically speaking they could not justify themselves at all. One could say that GFA was noble and had the heart of a saint. Therefore he only killed the tyrant Dxian and did not offend Crown Prince Wuging and the remnants of Yin Shang. However, how could one explain that GFA consecutively ordered 3 of his brothers to spy on Wuging near his territory? These 3 brothers were not small characters. Whether it was money, land, or troops, they were all of high standards. In the 4th year after the fall of Yin Shang, GFA suddenly died. His 13-year-old son Zhou Qingwang ascended the throne. Then, his 3 brothers who were spying on Wuging directly joined forces with Wuging and caused the rebellion of the 3 eunuchs. They almost destroyed the Zhou dynasty. At the same time, Dxian's move also shattered GFA's dream of becoming an emperor. This was because he could not allow a person controlled by Hongjun to become the ancestor of the human Tao. That would be blasphemy to the human race and irresponsible to his descendants. Therefore, destroying the star-picking tower was also an important factor in shattering GFA's dreams of becoming an emperor. With the help of the Ren sect and the Chan sect, GFA could have swept away all the vassals. However, due to Dxian's counterattack, he had to call a truce. Not only did he let go of Wuging and the remnants of the Shang dynasty, but he also had to divide the territories he had snatched to the other vassals. Even he only had the rights of rights, music, and conquest. He was still one of the vassals, but he had only overthrown his superior. Therefore he did not dare to call himself an emperor, nor could he call himself an emperor because he did not deserve it. Dxian's death had also planted a seed in the hearts of the Zhou dynasty's vassals. That was, divine authority was not unshakable. So what if GFA has Hongjun, Ren school and Chan school behind him? With the mountains and rivers of the Shang dynasty and the fate of the Shang dynasty, the heavenly Tao could not touch the human supremacy. Without the existence of traitors like Weizi, Baigan, and Yin Hong, even if GFA and Jiangxia starved to death outside Zhaoge City, it would not affect Dxian to be the human king. The marquises and kings of the Zhou dynasty did not see how supreme the heavenly Tao was. They did not see how the immortals moved mountains and filled the seas. They saw how Dxian fought against the heavenly Tao and the immortals with his mortal body. He could even turn his hand into clouds and rain. What they saw was the terror and methods of the supreme human being. The Zhou dynasty indeed had a history of nearly 800 years. However, it was inhumane because all the Zhou dynasty's vassals were constantly infecting their territories. Although those vassals were vassals of the Zhou dynasty in name, they had actually become a country within a country. They did not even bother to listen to the orders of the Zhou dynasty. During GFA's era, the Zhou dynasty's territory was still large. Even if the rebellion of the 3 eunuchs broke out, the Zhou dynasty had enough power to quell the rebellion. However, after 800 years, did the Zhou dynasty still have any territory to infect? When those spring and autumn overlords were fighting for the world, the Zhou dynasty was not yet extinct. Moreover, it could be counted as a national throne. After the end of the spring and autumn warring states period, the Qin dynasty completed the unification of the land. The Han dynasty completed the unification of the mind. No matter how bad the later dynasties were, no matter how muddle-headed the kings were, they could be said to be second only to one person and above tens of thousands of people. Moreover, once the situation of the vassals seizing territories appeared, they would not continue the national throne. It was only when the spring and autumn warring states period could no longer be infeft that a chaotic era like the spring and autumn warring states period broke out. If Hongjun was said to be a strange man who suppressed the three Daos of heaven, earth, and man by himself. In that case, DXN was a king who was not inferior to Hongjun in the slightest. In fact, he was even superior to Hongjun. Wu Gung had a good hand that his father had left for him. No matter how he played, he would not be defeated and killed. Even if he had to die, he could directly drag GFA and the Zhou royal family to perish together. Others might even think highly of him. In the end, a rebellion of the three eunuchs broke out. It was a strong start but weak finish. It made Zhou Gongdan, a powerful minister, leave a good name in history. It was a model for the future ministers who tried to overthrow the emperor to learn from. Especially Yin Hong and Yin Jiao, who had already been conferred as gods, when they saw Wu Gung's performance in the heavenly court. They were so angry that they wanted to tear Wu Gung apart. They really couldn't understand why their father, who was obviously a man with outstanding foresight and deep schemes, would fail so badly in choosing an heir. He didn't choose between the two outstanding sons, and insisted on choosing the most useless one. However, even though that was the case, Yin Hong and Yin Jiao had already known that their father's actions back then were to oppose Hongjun. When choosing a successor, he would rather choose a mediocre emperor than choose Yin Hong and Yin Jiao, who were nurtured by the Jiang clan. Because choosing them to succeed the throne was equivalent to DXN personally burning his years of hard work. However, when Lin Yuan said these words, it still made Yin Hong's heart surge with uncontrollable killing intent. This bastard, he deserves to die. Yin Hong suddenly clenched his fists. The blood in his body surged. He stared at Lin Yuan with a gloomy gaze. In the next moment he suddenly punched out. The world that had just returned to normal darkened again. Even the thunder clouds above his head were scattered by the blood and fist intent. However, the sky was still pitch black. It was as if all the light had been absorbed into this punch. Immediately after, an indomitable and fierce fist radiance shone, as if it was going to break this dark world. Chapter 1159. In Shunning City. Li Zhong's expression changed abruptly. He flew up into the sky and roared, "Fellow cultivators in the city, please lend me a hand. If this punch really hits, even if it's just the aftershock, the city defense array of Shunning City will not be able to withstand it. If the city is destroyed, we can't escape death." By the time he finished speaking, Li Zhong had already activated his Gang Qi and constructed a new layer of light screen under the light screen formed by the Great City Barrier Formation. Then, the guards and officials of the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion followed closely behind. They activated their Gang Qi and Genuine Qi, adding colorful colors to this layer of light curtain built by cultivators. In addition to the Prince's mansion of the Northern Frontier, members of the Demon Emperor Association, the Embroidered Gown Guards, the Northern Frontier Academy, and other government offices affiliated with the Northern Frontier also flew into the air, adding a bit more thickness to this layer of light curtain. Then came the rogue cultivators, well-known families, and even cultivators passing by the Northern Frontier. At the critical moment of life and death, they had no choice but to work together. The fist print arrived with a roar. Lin Yuan's face didn't change. The next moment, the endless rainstorm formed many phantoms between him and Yin Hong. Their original appearances couldn't be seen, but they could feel that even if they were phantoms, they still had extremely powerful power. Almost at the moment when they appeared, the world was shrouded in all kinds of ferocious and domineering qi. Even the defender formation and the defense built by cultivators seemed to be of no help. Most of the ordinary people in Shunning City who couldn't intervene still felt their breathing stagnant, as if there was a layer of mountain on their backs. If Lin Yuan didn't rescue Shunning City before because he believed that Shunning City could protect itself, then at this moment, Lin Yuan's sudden outburst directly hammered the fact that Lin Yuan didn't care about the life and death of Shunning City at all. In fact, this was indeed the case. Lin Yuan boasted that he was not a good person, let alone a Virgin Mary. When he had the ability, he didn't mind turning the Northern Frontier into a fair and just place, allowing those who were depressed in other places to develop their ambitions in the Northern Frontier. He would also change the policy so that the ordinary people in the Northern Frontier could live a good life with enough to eat and warm clothes, be well off, and even have the ability to let their own bloodline advance towards the world of cultivation. But when one's ability was insufficient, what righteousness? What reputation? What persona? Everything can be discarded. There were always people who liked to talk about Lin Yuan's identity as a demon beast. Even though Lin Yuan had made reforms time and time again, allowing those who were willing to trade their hands for a better life in the northern frontier to live a better life, there were also people who slandered him, saying that Lin Yuan was just a demon beast. How could he have a heart of compassion? Then they openly blamed everything that Lin Yuan had done on Li Zhong, the king of the northern frontier. Anyway, in their eyes, the only thing worth worrying about in the northern frontier was Lin Yuan. No matter how good Li Zhong's reputation was, he was just a puppet in Lin Yuan's hands. If they were the ones to blame Lin Yuan, they could also make Li Zhong a good puppet. But even these people didn't know that when it came to personal safety, Lin Yuan's actions were even crueler and more heartless than the demon beasts they had previously claimed. Shunning City was conquered? Rebuilt? People in the northern frontier were all dead? Again. But to take Lin Yuan's life? Sorry, before he returned to the world where he had lived in his previous life and took revenge with his own hands, he couldn't swallow this anger. The fist whistled through the air and shattered the phantoms of the fiend gods. A large amount of water splashed onto the Grand Barrier Array. In an instant, ripples appeared on the Grand Barrier Array. After that, the light barrier formed by the Grand Barrier Array dimmed down. It seemed that it wouldn't be long before it collapsed completely. The rumbling sounds were incessant. With the continuous bombardment of the Great Defensive Formation, the residents of Shunning City, who were already having difficulty breathing, suddenly spat out mouthfuls of blood. Some elderly people simply couldn't bear such pressure and died on the spot. Among them there were many young children and weak people who were sick. "In Hong, today you killed my people in the northern frontier. In the future this king will reward you handsomely." Lin Yuan's eyes trembled slightly and he said in a cold voice, "When this king comes to the untainted land, I will go to the heavenly court to find the list of deification. I will erase your name, scatter your soul, and let you disappear in the river of time. Even if the chaos is reborn and all things are reborn, this king will find you again and kill you hundreds, thousands and tens of thousands of times until your origin is completely obliterated." The golden crown on Yin Hong's head had been completely shattered, but his black hair was raised upwards, like a great demon roaring in the world. He grinned at Lin Yuan and sneered, "That's only if you have the life to live until that day, you bastard." The phantoms of gods and demons were smashed one after another. When the fist print arrived in front of Lin Yuan, it was still as strong as before, as if it had infinite power and would not stop until it completely smashed Lin Yuan. Many of the dissipating fists also smashed onto the defensive formation of Shunning City. Finally, the defensive formation, which was already overwhelmed by the fists, couldn't hold on any longer. With a series of cracking noises, the defensive formation completely collapsed. The rest of the fist light smashed on the defense formed by the cultivators. Suddenly, countless cultivators in the airborne realm and the heavenly gang realm were sent flying by the terrifying power. Screams of pain could be heard everywhere. However, at this moment, no one would investigate in detail. No one knew how many people had died under this punch. Even the cultivators who were lucky enough to survive lay in the ruins without making a sound. It was obvious that they couldn't even get up. Because under such a situation, there was no point in playing dead at all. So what if they could play it well? When the fist light fell, as long as they were within the attack range, they would be directly smashed into meat paste. As long as they still had the strength to fight, they would definitely go up and continue to strengthen this layer of defense. Pfft. Li Zhong, who was in the lead, opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was frighteningly pale. Li Xen stood in the air not far away from Li Zhong. The aura on his body was even more dispirited. He was actually beaten down by this punch. Seeing this, Li Zhong also sighed slightly. Li Xen had been blessed by the heavens ever since he came to the northern frontier. Since he was also an official of the northern frontier, he had been blessed by the luck of the northern frontier. Coupled with his own talent, he was not weak at all. In a short time he directly rushed to the 6th level of the Void Realm. Such a cultivation advancement was not only in other places, but also in the northern frontier, where cultivation was generally not low. However, this time, Li Xian was beaten down by more than one level. Li Xian's cultivation was still at the 2nd level of the Void Realm, which was considered to be his solid foundation. Moreover, since this punch had caused his cultivation to fall, it had definitely injured his foundation as well. If he didn't recuperate for a few years, not to mention improving his cultivation might even continue to regress, and he might even become a complete cripple. Chapter 1160. Surge of Wind and Thunder. When the fist seal was almost in front of Lin Yuan roared furiously. The lightning armor attached to his flood dragon roared out at this moment and turned into a lifelike lightning dragon. It crashed into the fist seal in front of him. Almost instantly, the lightning dragon was smashed into pieces by the fist seal. However, the fist seal was also at the end of its flight. When the lightning dragon was completely torn apart, the fist seal was already so blurry that it could not be seen clearly. When it landed on Lin Yuan's body, the damage it caused was not worth mentioning. It only pushed Lin Yuan back 3 meters. It no longer had the violent aura that wanted to tear Lin Yuan apart. This? Yin Hong's eyes narrowed as he looked at Lin Yuan in disbelief. For a moment he seemed to have lost the ability to speak. That fist, that was the fist intent his father had left for him. It was also the only thing his father had left for him. He had studied it for countless years, but he could not even comprehend a trace of its true meaning. More importantly, that fist contained the human king's aura that belonged only to DXN. That was DXIN's will that pressed forward courageously, ferociously, and firmly believed that man can conquer the heavens. That was the human king's will that surpassed the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, or even surpassed them. He had broken the aristocratic class and the theory of divine authority. He would rather destroy his country to protect the land of Yan Huang and not let the other races touch it. He had spent his entire life to make man stand above all things. He did not hesitate to fight against chi refinement cultivators, immortals and primordial creatures. He had fought until his country was destroyed and his family abandoned him. After that, he still wanted to deal a fatal blow to the puppet emperor supported by Hongjun. How could this be possible? The fist aura could be broken. With a certain level of cultivation, it could be easily done. However, when the human king's will was imprinted, even a saint would have to temporarily avoid it. The fact that this Black Jiao could withstand the human king's will could only mean that the Black Jiao also possessed the human king's will or something similar. You're done attacking. Now it's my turn. Lin Yuan raised his head and hissed as his blue-white eyes flashed with cold killing intent. Retreat quickly. However, Yin Hong's expression changed. He shouted and pushed Yu Jiang forward with a flip of his hand while he retreated explosively. At this point, so what if he hated Lin Yuan to the core? The other party could even withstand the will of a human king. He was not in existence on the same level as him. If he continued to fight with Lin Yuan, he would only be asking for humiliation. How could he give up his life here? Yu Jiang was still trying to figure out Yin Hong's punch, so he didn't come back to his senses. By the time the words retreat quickly woke him up, he had already been pushed back more than 30 meters by Yin Hong. When he looked up, he saw the 4 immortal exterminating swords coming at him. Bastard, and dares to harm me. Yu Jiang's face turned cold. He opened his mouth and roared. DXN was actually a descendant of the Yellow Emperor. However, compared to the other descendants of the Yellow Emperor, his seniority was much lower. Moreover, Yin Hong called himself DXN, and not DXN. His seniority was even lower, so it wasn't a problem for him to call Yu Jiang ancestor. However, at the critical moment, this descendant of his actually pushed him out to block the attack without hesitation. This was something that even a bastard wouldn't do. Even a vicious tiger wouldn't eat its cubs. Was the words retreat quickly a warning? No, it was because Yin Hong saw that he was trying to figure out DXIN's fist intent and deliberately roared. Firstly, it was to interrupt his comprehension. Secondly, it was because he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to react to Lin Yuan's attack and would be killed, unable to buy enough time for him to escape. However, at this moment Yu Jiang had already been driven to this point. If he still wanted to escape, he would completely treat Lin Yuan as a decoration. He could only roar and brace himself to collide with the afterimages of the 4 immortal exterminating swords. In fact, if he was at his peak, Yu Jiang wouldn't have been able to deal with these 4 afterimages cut from the long river of time. However, he wasn't at his peak at all. He had stayed in the Tianwu world for a long time. Although it wasn't that he didn't receive the power of incense, it was still completely unable to make ends meet. If that wasn't the case, why would he run to the northern frontier to provoke the Black Jiao? Wasn't it just to spread the orthodoxy? In the end, he didn't take advantage of the situation. He even fought a big battle with Batu and Kagura. The injuries he suffered weren't worth mentioning, but the consumption of his divine power couldn't be ignored. The power he could erupt with at this moment was not much stronger than that of the natives of the Jianghu world. At this moment, facing this illusory version of the immortal exterminating sword formation, he learned from the mistakes of Bu Xingzhou. At the same time, the group of primitive desolate realm experts who were secretly watching the battle looked at each other in dismay. Although they disdained Yu Jiang and Yin Hong's character, in any case they were all from the primitive desolate realm. After interacting with each other for so many years, they more or less had some friendship. At this moment, when they saw Yu Jiang about to die, they couldn't help but feel a little sad. A primitive desolate realm expert crossed space and entered Hanba's secluded cultivation place. He said in a deep voice, "Senior Hanba, although you and the Black Jiao were somewhat filthy before, it was only a misunderstanding. Later on, you also pointed out a path for the northern frontier. It can be considered as mending the relationship between both sides. If you come forward to plead for mercy for Yu Jiang, I think the Black Jiao will at least give you face, right? Why don't you? He deserves to die. Both of them deserve to die." Hanba's hoarse voice suddenly rang out, directly interrupting the primitive desolate realm expert's words. The primitive desolate realm expert's voice came to an abrupt halt. He shrunk his neck somewhat awkwardly. Yu Jiang and Yin Hong were of the Yellow Emperor's bloodline. Hanba was even the Yellow Emperor's daughter. In the war to unify Yan Huang, Hanba had also made great contributions to the Yellow Emperor. Although the ending wasn't good, she had left her name behind. Compared to Yu Jiang and Yin Hong, she was much stronger. When they interacted normally, Yu Jiang and Yin Hong also respectfully addressed Hanba as ancestor. However, at this moment, Hanba's response was deserved to die. When Yu Jiang was in trouble? If they were to fall into the Black Jiao's hands one day, Hanba would definitely ignore them even more. Hanba turned her head. Her long hair that was like withered grass covered her face. Her expression couldn't be seen clearly. However, her hoarse voice was filled with endless killing intent. She said coldly, "When I find out the whereabouts of Yin Hong, I will definitely kill this bastard with my own hands. I will not let this bastard tarnish the reputation of the Yellow Emperor's bloodline. And you bunch of clowns. Although your mouth sounds nice, do you really think that I don't know what you are planning?" When he spoke up to hear, boundless baleful aura and blood energy burst out from Hanba's body. His pair of deathly gray eyes seemed to turn as he stared at the primordial creature's head, and he said coldly, "If you continue to instigate my Yellow Emperor's bloodline to become enemies with the Black Flood Dragon, then I'll dig out your heart once more and see if you really have a heart of 7 orifices. Do you understand what I'm saying? Let's do it." Chapter 1161. Boom. The sword shadows of the 4 immortal slaying swords dispersed. Yu Jiang's broken body fell from the sword formation. Even his primordial spirit was swept away by the nether realm's black water. Seeing Yu Jiang being killed and Yin Hong fleeing, countless residents of Shunning City clapped their hands in joy. After all, in their eyes, although Lin Yuan was a bit cold-blooded, he was still protecting the northern frontier. Moreover, Lin Yuan was usually scolded as a barbaric demon. At this time, as long as Li Zhong stood out, they would believe that the northern frontier was protecting them. Lin Yuan's attitude was not important at all. Even if he did good things, these people would not appreciate it. All intelligent creatures had a common problem. They would only believe what they wanted to believe. For example, in the history of Lin Yuan's previous life, Wu Ziqian had won 26 battles and had won 23 battles. There were still 2 battles left before the war started. At most, she had lost 1 foreign battle. She had become the world's overlord, and all the countries had established Wu Zhou as the top of the world at that time. However, in the words of Tang and Song Rushing, Wu Ziqian had lost 9 out of 10 battles, and the military prestige of the Tang Empire had been completely destroyed. After Li Longji ascended the throne, he pushed down Wu Ziqian and crazily discredited Wu Ziqian. He cancelled the system of Wu Ziqian and wantonly appointed people from the Confucian sect and the aristocratic families. In the later years of Li Longji's reign, the Tang dynasty's territory seemed vast, but in reality, it had nothing to do with Li Longji. There were provincial governors everywhere. It was just like a country within a country. In a serious situation, Li Longji could not even mobilize the troops he could use. He was attacked to the capital and did not dare to fight with the rebel army. He directly abandoned the capital and fled. Such a retarded person was praised by the scholars of Tang and Song dynasty to be a hero of the Golden Age, an eternal emperor. From this, one could see how much wealth Wu Ziqian had left behind for him. Then why did Li Longji and the scholars of Tang and Song dynasty crazily discredit Wu Zetian and push the blame to Wu Zetian, claiming that Wu Zetian was a tyrant who only knew how to use her beauty to entertain people? The answer was very simple. Because they could not accept it. Whether it was Li Longji or the later emperors, whether it was the scholars of the Tang dynasty or the Song dynasty, none of them could accept the fact that a lowly woman had climbed over their heads and performed countless feats that they didn't even dare to imagine. Therefore they would rather abandon this glorious history than truthfully record Wu Jiong as a famous ruler throughout the ages. In Lin Yuan's previous life, almost all historians, except for those scum who fish for fame and praise and pretend to know when they don't know to deceive the ignorant, knew that the history of the Tang and Song dynasties was just for fun. They would rather believe in the private notes circulating among the people with the evidence of unearthed cultural relics than directly believe in official history such as the comprehensive mirror for governance. It was the same in the northern frontier. These people would rather believe that all the benevolent policies in the northern frontier came from Li Zhong than believe that it was always Lin Yuan who treated them well. Although Lin Yuan added fuel to the fire behind the scenes, the reason why this idea could be so popular was that these people already had such a seed in their hearts. Those ambitious people, and Lin Yuan just fertilized this seed and watered it. How Lin Yuan did it, why did it have anything to do with them? In short, they didn't believe it. At this moment, the third prince, who had been escorted into Shunning City by the imperial guards, was even more despondent. Looking at the dead and wounded Shunning City, looking at the cultivators who were still pale after surviving the disaster, and looking at the godlike figure in the sky, there was only one thought left in his mind: my father's brain was kicked by a donkey. After a quarter of an hour, in the prince's mansion in the northern frontier, Lin Yuan's body was coiled up. His blue-white vertical pupils looked at the pale-faced brothers Li Zhong and Li Xin, and he said in a deep voice, "Although Shunning City suffered a great loss in this battle, it can't be said that we didn't gain anything. At least after this battle, the demon venerable of the southern wasteland will tuck his tail between his legs, and the surrounding empires won't even dare to breathe loudly. In the short term, the northern frontier will have no worries. Therefore, in this king's opinion, we should kill the Frost Mirror Khan and occupy the Frost Mirror grassland. Let's start the plan as usual and not delay any more." Li Zhong thought for a moment, then he cupped his hands toward Lin Yuan and said, "Yes, I will do it right away." Then Lin Yuan's gaze fell on Li Xin as he said with a smile, "This drop in realm is your calamity, but it is also your opportunity. If you can cross this hurdle, your future achievements will be limitless. Even if you can't compare to your elder brother, you will definitely not be trapped in the void realm like a mediocre person and not be able to find the way for a lifetime." Yes. Li Xin's aura was still weak, but he still cupped his hands and replied in a deep voice. Lin Yuan gently swayed his dragon tail and said indifferently, "All right, I know you're feeling uncomfortable and can't take this lying down. Therefore this king grants you an indefinite leave. You can go to Mount Shaoyi or go to the academies of the other empires. This king will take care of everything for you. What do you think? When you come back, you'll be promoted from the commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guards to the governor of the Embroidered Uniform Guards. You'll be in complete control of the Embroidered Uniform Guards in the northern frontier. Those spies outside will also be under your command. What do you think?" Li Xin's breathing paused for a moment. This was using him as a knife. Yingtian Guan of Buxing continent had already been handed over to Yi Bilan to deal with. The remaining Mount Shaoyi Zen Monastery and the academies of the Confucian sect that had Song Shuebua's portraits hanging on their walls as offerings were all targets for Lin Yuan to take revenge on. And now, Lin Yuan had given him this task to show others just how ruthless the most ferocious mad dog on the northern frontier was. This was a warning to those forces that wanted to make an enemy out of the northern frontier. It was to let them think twice before making an enemy out of the northern frontier. If they didn't have the ability to overthrow the northern frontier, then when the northern frontier counterattacked, not to mention those who were related to them, even those who were friends with them would have to die. Whether this matter was done well or not, it would cause a lot of trouble. Countless years later, they would be scolded so badly that they wouldn't be able to raise their heads. Then could they not do it? That was fine. Later on, the Embroidered Uniform Guards would directly send a governor who dared to do this and directly suppress Li Xin until he couldn't breathe. Would you believe it? The northern frontier lacked everything now, but it didn't lack capable people. There were many people who were willing to be this mad dog. As for being scolded, would they be afraid of being scolded if they were already a mad dog? If they were really scolded, it would mean that they didn't kill enough, didn't punish enough, and didn't do enough. After taking a deep breath, Li Xen licked his lips and a sinister smile appeared on his pale face. He said in a cold voice, "By the decree of the Dragon King, during this holiday, this subordinate will definitely tell those forces that want to make an enemy out of the northern frontier what will happen to them if they fail to take action." Chapter 1162. 3 days later. The old land of the Shenwu dynasty, the Central Plains, near the imperial capital. Yi Bailin, with his clothes torn and his weapon stained with blood, was riding on a green wolf in the Wisdom State. He looked gloomily in the direction of the Yingtian Temple. Of the 2,000 Yi Bailin riders, less than 1,000 had come to report, and most of them were injured. Yingtianguan's formation was located in every one of the 108 cities and towns. In order to remove these formation cores, Yi Buhuan's cavalry used all means possible to find out the location of the formation cores within 3 days. However, there were always mistakes in their actions. Yingtianguan's people naturally had some quick-witted people who could see what these new refugees were plotting. Therefore, the battle to remove the formation cores did not go smoothly. Fortunately, it was still completed in the end. Bureau Chief, the Yingtian Temple must have received the news. Even if we did it cleanly, the formation eyes can't be hidden. At the moment, the Yingtian Temple should have gathered their disciples from all over the country. Maybe they have borrowed some masters from their friends. Can we really slaughter the Yingtian Temple with just a few of us? One of Yi Bailin's riders rode his horse to Yi Bailin's side. With a simple and honest face, he smiled bitterly and said, "I'm not afraid of death. I'm just worried that if we don't complete the task given by the Dragon King, those little bastards of the genie guards will step on us." Yi Bailin silently wiped the blood off his saber and said slowly, "Who told you that I expect you to slaughter the Yingtian Temple?" But Yi Bailin's rider was slightly startled and said with a simple face, "We only have so many brothers. Could it be that the bureau chief has asked for other reinforcements?" "No reinforcements, but we do have evil spirits." Yi Bailin raised his saber and pointed at the gate of the Yingtian Temple. He said with a cold face, "There are some talismans buried outside the Yingtian Temple to deter the sky demon. What we need to do later is to rush into the gate of the Yingtian Temple and open the bamboo tubes I gave you before. Then we will pour out the things inside and dirty the talismans used to deter the sky demon. In addition, the things in the bamboo tubes can attract the sky demon. When the time comes, the sky demon will swarm in. Even if they have other means, it will be of no use. I am the one who will succeed in this. Even if I don't stop at night, I'm not afraid of death. It's all up to me." Fearless in the face of death. A group of unremitting night riders raised the sabers in their hands and roared in unison. More than 1,000 of them storming the gate of Yingtian Temple was already a matter of life and death. At that time, if they took out the demon-attracting item, they would inevitably fall into a situation of being attacked from both front and rear. Therefore, Yi Bailin's words were tantamount to telling them that this trip would only end in death. But even if they were to drag Yingtianguan down with them, none of the night uncollected cavalry had the slightest intention of retreating. Instead, they all raised their war blades and shouted out their battle cry. On the other side, the Frost Mirror cavalry, who had been besieged by the northern frontier for more than 3 months, was now facing a huge crisis. The cavalry of the Shuangjian dynasty, except for the Blood Liao Knights and some tribal khans, was mainly composed of light cavalry. However, no matter how rich the Shuangjian dynasty was, they could only afford heavy cavalry with 3 horses at most. One was for riding, one was for storing equipment, and one was for maintaining sufficient physical strength at all times in case of a sudden battle. The light cavalry was even worse. Light cavalry basically only had 1 mount. Although the weight of their armor was not as exaggerated as that of heavy cavalry, they did not have mounts that could be changed. Therefore, they could only bring as few supplies as possible. A Frost Mirror cavalry could only bring enough rations to last for 3 days at most. Normally, they mainly relied on raiding places and transporting supplies behind the main army. There had never been any major problems because when it came to cavalry before the rise of the northern frontier, the Shuangjian dynasty was definitely the undisputed number 1. They had always been the ones robbing others. There had never been a situation where they were surrounded and attacked. However, when they encountered the northern frontier this time, they were clearly at a disadvantage. They encountered the even more terrifying northern frontier dragon cavalry and were suppressed to the point where they could not breathe. When the Blood Liao Knights finally arrived, they were defeated by the enemy's feigned defeat and counterattack tactics. The remaining Frost Mirror cavalry did not manage to escape either. When they turned around, they encountered the Blackwater army that was constantly encircling them. There was also the equally elite night cavalry. Those night cavalry were like evil spirits hiding in the grasslands. As long as they were targeted, there was no way to get rid of them. Sooner or later, they would be completely devoured by them or the Blackwater army that came to support them. Right now, the Shuangjian dynasty's main army was restricted to the northern frontiers area near the Great Wall. Even though the northern frontier army did not attack, they knew that the northern frontier army would not let them off so easily. At the very least, they would take a layer of skin off them. The Frost Mirror tribes had run out of dry rations, and the supplies that were intercepted along with the main army had been eaten as well. The Frost Mirror tribes had completely lost their composure as an alliance army. When they ran out of food, they did not hesitate to attack their comrades from other tribes and steal as much food as they could so that they could live longer. They would only have a chance to live if they could survive until the Northern Alliance decided to put them on trial. At this point, they could no longer steal rations. However, the Frost Mirror tribes were still fighting and killing each other. At first, Frost Mirror Khan thought that they were just venting their negative emotions. But later, he noticed that the bodies of the Frost Mirror tribe's warriors would be taken away by both sides. Once, when he went out for an inspection to boost morale, he noticed that some tribes were still drinking meat soup. Although they were not in good spirits, they were still able to survive. However, when someone handed him a bowl of meat soup, he realized that they had run out of food. Even their mounts had been eaten. This meat soup, Frost Mirror Khan felt his scalp go numb. When he came back to his senses, he was already back in his own camp. He did not dare to observe the situation of the other Frost Mirror tribes. Those were no longer human. They were a bunch of monsters in human skin. What was the Northern Frontier Army trying to do? Why did they treat them like this? They were going to die anyway. Why couldn't they just give them a quick death? Frost Mirror Khan held his head in pain and said with a sorrowful face, "I can't take it anymore. I can't live like this anymore. Men, go to the Northern Frontier Great Wall and announce that this king wants to see the Black Jiao. If the Black Jiao doesn't want to see him, then Li Zhong can. This king wants to ask them what they want to let us go." Chapter 1163. Northern Frontier Prince's Mansion, Conference Hall. Li Zhong slowly put down the teacup in his hand and said with a mocking look, "Who has the time to meet them? I think this old dog is really shameless. He has been forced into such a desperate situation, but he is still hoping for a way out? If I were in such a situation, I would have killed myself to avoid being humiliated. What a shame, to be the emperor of a dynasty." "You can't say that." A middle-aged man in a cyan robe also put down the teacup in his hand and said with a faint smile, "The Shuangjian dynasty has been relying on their fast horses to look down on the demonic beasts in the Hengduan Mountains. In their eyes, the Kumu dynasty and the Xinwu dynasty are like money bags. They can take as much as they want. Anyway, these barbarians are used to fighting to support their fighting. The last thing they are afraid of is being stubborn. Therefore, although they are forced into a desperate situation now, when they return to the Frost Mirror grassland, they will most likely continue to plunder the northern frontier." If Lin Yuan were here, he would definitely agree with the middle-aged man's words. After all, the nomadic people had always been like this. The Han dynasty destroyed the Xiongnu tribe. At the end of the Eastern Han dynasty, the Central Plains suffered a great loss due to the chaos of the feudal lords. However, the foreign tribes still dared to rebel and created the tragedy known as the Five Barbarians Rebellion. The Mongolian Yuan dynasty was almost destroyed by the Ming dynasty. The Golden family lost its prestige and the Ming dynasty was defeated by the Manchurian Qing. For these nomadic people in the feudal period, you could either keep beating them until they could not raise their heads or wait for them to plunder a large amount of wealth, land, and population like the Tang and Song dynasties. There was no possibility of peace between the two sides. Li Zhong laughed and did not respond to the middle-aged man's words. Instead, he said in a deep voice, "Master Wu, a straightforward person does not resort to insinuations. You and I both know why you came to the northern frontier this time. As for how to deal with the Shuangjian dynasty, my Dragon King will make the decision. Master Wu has no right to criticize me." Master Wu pondered for a moment, then shook his head gently and said, "I am just stating the facts. Besides, since the king of the northern frontier knows what I am here for, you should know that there is nothing more worthwhile for the northern frontier than cooperating with us, right?" "That may be the case, but the problem is that Master Wu should know that the northern frontier clans have their own rules. Whether it is Dragon King, me, or the northern frontier clans, None of us will allow anyone to break the rules. Li Zhong shook his head and smiled. The Dragon King has his own decision regarding the Frost Mirror Prairie. Master Wu, you came here for nothing. Master Wu was not a clan master from the Xinwu dynasty or a tribal Khan from the prairie. Following the demise of the Xinwu dynasty, some powers that had been suppressed by the Xinwu dynasty came out from the shadows and formed a new power. They wanted to use trade to buy the prairie and become a new dynasty to maintain the structure of the 7 dynasties. However, this idea was clearly wishful thinking. Not to mention whether Lin Yuan would agree to this kind of thing, just the aristocratic families of the northern region would not allow outsiders to snatch food from their bowls. Everyone in the northern region knew that the Frost Mirror grassland existed in name only. This also meant that if Lin Yuan did not make any other arrangements, all the products of the Frost Mirror grassland would be merged into the Chamber of Commerce of the northern region. In the eyes of those aristocratic families, it was another huge sum of money flowing into their pockets. At this time, Lin Yuan could keep the Frost Mirror grassland, but he could never hand it over to other forces. I think you should reconsider because we've come with sincerity. First of all, the clans in the north are all clans from the Xinwu dynasty. Their combined strength is far from what they used to be at their peak. This also means that even if these clans work together, they're just ants that can be destroyed with a flick of the finger in the north. It's the same for the north and the other forces. Therefore, these clans definitely won't be able to take a piece of meat like the Frost Mirror Prairie. If you want to support a puppet regime in the northern frontier, it will be impossible to succeed. Even if you do support a puppet regime, in the eyes of the other dynasties, you will be destroying the structure of the 7 dynasties. When the time comes, the Deadwood dynasty will definitely attack this puppet regime and even swallow the Frost Mirror Prairie that you fought so hard to conquer. Think about it. Are you willing to let the Deadwood dynasty take advantage of the land that the men of the northern frontier fought for? That's obviously not realistic. Therefore, once the Deadwood dynasty makes a move, the northern frontier will definitely be locked in a long war with the Deadwood dynasty. This is definitely not a good situation for the development of the northern frontier. The patriarch of the Wu family sucked in a deep breath and patted his chest. He smiled, but if you give the Frost Mirror Plains to us, you won't have to worry about that at all. With our strength, we might not be able to take on the Withered Wood Empire, but we can keep them busy for quite some time even without the support of the North. During that time, the North will be able to devour the Azure River Empire or the Chuyan Empire. At that time, the North won't even need to send troops. All we need to do is express our support, and the Withered Wood Empire will give up on attacking us. Family Head Wu's voice was very tempting. Thinking about it from what he said, it was indeed a very tempting suggestion. A group of forces that did not belong to the northern frontier had taken over the Frost Mirror Prairie. No matter what the outside world thought, the Deadwood dynasty would definitely not let go of this great opportunity to swallow the Frost Mirror Prairie. At that time, the two sides would definitely be locked in a tug of war. If nothing unexpected happened, the Deadwood dynasty would definitely have the upper hand. At that time, the new force that had taken over the Frost Mirror Prairie would have to rely on the northern frontier to barely survive. More importantly, the appearance of this new force would form a flesh barrier that would stop the most troublesome Deadwood dynasty for the northern frontier. It would give the northern frontier enough time to swallow the Qingjiang dynasty and the Chuyan dynasty. Even if they wanted stability, taking back the land that the Xinwu dynasty had lost was a good choice. It would also give the northern frontier enough time to accumulate strength and build a foundation for conquering the world. It could be seen that Family Head Wu had put in a lot of effort before coming to the northern frontier. Not only did he see the northern frontier's ambition, but he even planned the easiest path for the northern frontier. If it was before, Li Zhong might really be tempted, but now Li Zhong just wanted to spit on Family Head Wu's face. If Family Head Wu was not an idiot, then he wanted to push the northern frontier to the position of public enemy. Chapter 1164. It seemed like the latter was more likely because they would only have a chance to attack if the northern frontier became the public enemy. They could use the northern frontier's power and resources to quickly gain a foothold and improve themselves. When the northern frontier expanded to a certain extent and attracted the attention of all the empires, they could naturally join forces with the Deadwood dynasty to attack the northern frontier. They could also use the geographical advantage of being close to the northern frontier to devour a large amount of resources from the northern frontier to fatten themselves up. Li Zhong picked up the teacup next to him and squinted at Master Wu. He didn't say anything. Master Wu paused for a moment. He seemed to be thinking about where he had gone wrong. Then his expression changed slightly. He cupped his hands at Li Zhong and said, "If the Northern Frontier King doesn't believe in our sincerity, we can use the Northern Frontier's name. If the Northern Frontier becomes the public enemy of all the empires, we won't be able to escape. Also, I can guarantee that all the benefits we get from the Frost Mirror grassland will be given to you for free, except for the resources necessary for development, in exchange for the protection of the Northern Frontier." At this point he revealed a warm smile and added, "We are really sincere." Li Zhong was still looking at Master Wu. After 2 breaths he said with a fake smile, "I've said that the Dragon King has other plans for the Frost Mirror grassland. Even if I promise you, it's another matter whether I can do it or not. Therefore, Master Wu, you're destined to come here for nothing." Master Wu's expression changed suddenly. No matter what he said, he still wouldn't listen? He came here with a mission. If he couldn't persuade Li Zhong to give up the Frost Mirror grassland, he didn't even dare to think about what would happen to him after he reported back. "Let's not talk about this anymore." Li Zhong smiled and waved his hand saying, "Wu family head's sincerity, I have indeed seen it. However, I also have my own difficulties. Wu family head should be clear about this, right? I'm only the king of the Northern Frontier in name. Apart from having a bit of authority in the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion, I can't mobilize any of the other government offices, let alone the Northern Frontier Army, which is independent of the administrative system." Hearing this, Patriarch Wu sucked in a breath of cold air. Although he had long known that Li Zhong was only a puppet pushed forward by Lin Yuan, with the efforts of various forces, the introduction and implementation of the policies that benefited the people in the Northern Frontier were all placed on Li Zhong's head, and Lin Yuan, who had actually proposed all of this, was instead smeared as a cruel and ruthless demon beast. Under such circumstances, not to mention Li Zhong, who could become the king of the Northern Frontier, even a pig should have some influence, right? However, he had to believe Li Zhong's words. Because the Northern Frontier was different from other dynasties. There was no such thing as an imperial court in the Northern Frontier. Each government office was an independent system. Whether Lin Yuan existed or not, Li Zhong was only the king of the Northern Frontier in name. He only had the power to approve the proposals of other government offices, reject the proposals and let them reconsider. He would not have the power to kill his subordinates like other rulers in other places. However, didn't Li Zhong's words make it clear that in the Northern Frontier, only Lin Yuan's words carried weight? Li Zhong was not the only one who wanted to make this happen. Unless he could persuade more than half of the government offices in the Northern Frontier and the military of the Northern Frontier, it was possible to force Lin Yuan to agree to this matter. And it was just a possibility. Even if Li Zhong wanted to do something, those who supported him would only be the mortals who did not know the truth. The local cultivators, aristocratic families, and even the itinerant cultivators who migrated from other places who knew who had the final say in the Northern Frontier were all on Lin Yuan's side. Li Zhong could mobilize all the mortals in the Northern Frontier to try to overthrow Lin Yuan's rule. For these cultivators who submitted to Lin Yuan, he had to kill as many of them as he could to make them not dare to continue to cause trouble. After thinking for a moment, Master Wu said in a deep voice, "The king of the Northern Frontier has been oppressed by the Black Jiao to such a state. Don't you want to seize this opportunity to join forces with us to overthrow the Black Jiao's rule and monopolize the Northern Frontier?" Li Zhong raised his eyebrows and said with great interest, "It seems that Master Wu has come prepared. Then tell me, what should I do to monopolize the Northern Frontier? If I join forces with you, how can I guarantee that I can defeat the Black Jiao? And how can I guarantee that you, or the person behind you, will not become the new Black Jiao and continue to step on my head and abuse me?" Master Wu smiled, and a sharp light suddenly flashed in his eyes. As expected, he knew that a capable person like Li Zhong would never be willing to submit to others. Moreover, the one who really ruled the Northern Frontier was a demon beast. Speaking of this, he was no longer sleepy. The king of the Northern Frontier should know that the Black Jiao is getting weaker and weaker. Before he went to the Endless Sea, there were 2 rebellions by the king of the Northern Frontier, but they were quickly suppressed by the Black Jiao. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that the Black Jiao at that time was completely righteous. Even if he attacked the rebels, they would be isolated and helpless. But you are different. You are now the king of benevolence that the people of the Northern Frontier talk about. Even if the Black Jiao wants to touch you, he still needs to see if the people below are willing or not, right? The label of rebellion can't be placed on your head. To put it bluntly, the Black Jiao is already unpopular. The people of the northern frontier can't wait for you to become the king of the northern frontier, and not the puppet king that the Black Jiao has pushed out. Also, as long as you are willing to be on good terms with the aristocratic families and sects, under the Black Jiao's oppressive rule, the various cultivation forces will definitely be dissatisfied. Even if the various forces don't dare to jump out to support you directly, they will also not completely fall to the Black Jiao's side. If you have our help behind the scenes, even if you can't kill the Black Jiao, driving it away won't be a problem. This is what the people want. The smile on Master Wu's face grew wider and wider, and he said, also that self-proclaimed crown prince of the Thousand Swords dynasty Chou Wuing and his subordinate Lei Fan are now cooperating with us. As long as you agree, they will also be able to get your help. With the support of the people of the northern frontier and those people from the south, what are you worried about? Do. Li Zhong's right hand gently knocked on the table, and a thoughtful look appeared on his face. After a while, Li Zhong slowly raised his head, revealing a pair of bloodshot eyes, and said, how can I believe that you won't replace the Black Jiao? Is there a difference between being the Black Jiao's puppet king and being your puppet king? Chapter 1165. We're not that ambitious. Family head Wu smiled as he sipped his tea. The frost mirror grassland is enough for us to eat. If we try to take over the northern frontier, we'll definitely die. I can only say that you're overthinking things. Li Zhong was silent for a moment before he suddenly laughed. So, if we go according to your plan, what do I have to do? Or rather, what do I have to give you in order to gain your trust? The frost mirror grassland. Family head Wu's eyes flashed with fanaticism. We're not interested in the northern frontier. However, we won't allow the Seven Empires to break apart the Jianghu continent. We'll establish a new Shuangjian dynasty. After that, as long as you maintain your current attitude, we'll help you reclaim the lost land of the Shenwu dynasty. He paused for a moment as he restrained the fanaticism in his eyes. You just have to convince Black Jiao to hand the frost mirror grassland over to us. If possible, we also hope to obtain the results of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works. Whether it's manpower or materials, we're confident that we won't lose to the Northern Frontier. As long as you help us obtain the results of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works research, we'll be able to produce a large amount of related equipment very quickly. This will be extremely beneficial to you. The Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works. Li Zhong's expression suddenly became strange. The technology of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works could be considered black technology in the Jianghu world. It was several levels ahead of the other empires' technology, and even the Heavenly Gates technology. After all, it was a concept that Lin Yuan had brought over from his previous world. It completely abandoned the rigid requirements of the user's strength. The equipment produced by the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works could easily kill a cultivator if they were caught off guard. It was just like the battle at the Great Wall of the Northern Frontier. The Northern Frontier's army had only ignited their gunpowder without anyone controlling it, but they had still managed to destroy the Shuiliao Knights. This had caused the only army of the Shuangjian dynasty that could contend with the Northern Frontier's Dragon Riders to be completely annihilated. It had also caused the Shuangjian dynasty's army to be forced into a desperate situation, unable to even break out of the encirclement. According to the Jianghu world's technology tree, different magical tools and treasures in the hands of different people would erupt with different effects. As a result, the same treasures with different cultivations could really be used to show off in front of Master Guan. However, the equipment produced by the Northern Frontier was different. It was just like how a child could easily kill an adult with a gun. The difference between the two was just that great. I'm afraid I cannot fulfill this request. Li Zhong sighed and said, you might not know much about the Northern Frontier. Every government office in the Northern Frontier is an independent system. Different positions in the Northern Frontier have different levels of authority. For example, the Commander-in-Chief of the Embroidered Uniform Guards in the Northern Frontier is not inferior to my position as the King of the Northern Frontier. However, the Commander-in-Chief of the Embroidered Uniform Guards cannot even send a spy to the Ministry of Works. All the members of the Ministry of Works are secretly selected by the Dragon King. The authority of the Minister of Works is even higher than mine. It can be said that I am their superior in name, but the Minister of Works is still my superior in terms of authority. Li Zhong's expression turned ugly. He frowned and said, whether it is the ownership of the Frost Mirror Grassland or the results of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works, they are all matters that are far beyond my authority. Whether I can fulfill your request or not is another matter. Even if I can, I will be investigated immediately. Right now, I suspect that you have no intention of cooperating with me. You misunderstood. You misunderstood. Wu family head's forehead was suddenly covered with a layer of cold sweat. Because of these few words, the atmosphere that had been eased with great difficulty became cold again. Family head Wu wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and said with an obsequious smile, "It's my fault, my fault. I didn't even know the situation in the northern region, so I made a rash request of you. However, these two conditions are things that we are determined to achieve. Since you can't do it for the time being, we won't force you. How about this? Please give me a list of people to see who we need to convince to achieve these conditions. I will try to convince them one by one. If anything happens, I will bear all the responsibility. How about it?" 4 hours later. Northern Frontier Prince's mansion backyard. Li Zhong stood in front of Lin Yuan with his hands behind his back. He said in a deep voice, "That's the gist of it. However, the other party is very tight-lipped. They did not reveal which faction they belong to. During the conversation they mentioned to me more than once that they do not want to annex the northern frontier or the other empires. They only want to maintain the structure of the 7 great empires in Jianghu continent. Therefore, I deduce that they want us to focus our attention on the guardian of the heavenly gate." Lin Yuan thought for a moment and said, "Then do you think that it is possible that the other party is really the guardian of the heavenly gate?" Li Zhong shook his head lightly and said, "There is indeed such a possibility, but the possibility is not high. Previously, the guardian of the heavenly gate did not place spies in the northern frontier. Now, we can be sure that there are still people from the guardian of the heavenly gate in the northern frontier. However, for guardian of the heavenly gate like Ding Zai, unless it is absolutely necessary, they will not reveal their identity. Moreover, even if they reveal their identity, they will directly state which faction they belong to. This is their pride. Therefore, this group of people should want us to focus our attention on the guardian of the heavenly gate. It would be best if there is a conflict with the guardian of the heavenly gate. I suspect that they may have come from the south." "South? Demon sect disciples?" Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and said lightly, "Okay, I know. Continue to follow up on this matter. When necessary, you can reveal some research results of the Ministry of Works to them. However, there is no need to feed them too much. You can handle it yourself." "Yes." Li Zhong cupped his hands and said in a deep voice. After Li Zhong left, Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. Hongjun, this guy was strong, but he always felt that he was suffering from paranoia. Originally, he was a grand cultivator who relied on the heavenly Tao to become his own body. In the end, he merged with the heavenly Tao and treated the heavenly Tao as a puppet. Later on, he directly suppressed the mortal and earth Taos. Now that he felt that the heavenly martial world was a threat to him, Hongjuan's movements were obviously bigger. First, it was the generals Hang and Ha Mosquito Daoran and the others who came out in the open. Behind the scenes, there was also Yin Hong who was on the investiture of the gods list. Now, even the demon sect disciples who were related to the Nether River ancestor were involved in this matter. The invasion of the great desolate world into the heavenly martial world was obviously getting more and more serious. Chapter 1166. The investiture of the gods was an inescapable existence in the history of myths and legends. When talking about the investiture of the gods, it was impossible to avoid the mention of the immortals. It was also from the investiture of the gods that the eldritch world had never given birth to another powerful life form. For example, Neza and the monkey were worshipped by countless people. They were existences like the god of war. In essence, they were also chi refinement cultivators. Moreover, Neza killed the third prince and lost his life. He seemed to have revived, but he became a puppet in the hands of perfected Tai. As for the monkey's combat power, it was indeed debatable. The title of Great Sage equaling heaven was enough to describe the monkey's character, but it did not match his strength. It was not that the Great Sage equaling heaven was not worthy of the monkey. It was the monkey who was not worthy of the Great Sage equaling heaven. If the monkey wanted to wreak havoc in the heavenly palace and use the flower fruit mountain as the base, he would definitely go through the east heavenly gate. The monkey insisted on going to the south heavenly gate because the person guarding the east heavenly gate was someone the monkey did not dare to provoke. Not to mention that person, even that person's mount could beat up a monkey. The Grand Saint of Nine Spirits was that person's mount. According to the records in the Taoist books, a roar from the nine-headed lion could open the Hell's Gate. In the journey to the west, the Grand Saint of Nine Spirits also roared. He was an existence that could reach the 3 sages and the 9 springs. He was an unparalleled great demon that was respected by all kinds of lion demons as the ancestor. Compared to the monkey self-titled great sage equaling heaven, the Grand Saint of 9 Spirits was undoubtedly more terrifying. In the original journey to the west, when the Grand Saint of 9 Spirits was a demon in the lower realm, he did indeed beat the monkey. To be precise, he beat the monkey and Monk Sand together. The monkey could not escape from the Grand Saint of 9 Spirits even if he did a somersault. The West Heavenly Gate led directly to the Spirit Mountain in the west. The person guarding it was either a Buddha or a Bodhisattva. Similarly, they were existences that the monkey could not afford to provoke. As for the person guarding the North Heavenly Gate, it was Great Emperor Jianghu, the existence that was known as the Demon Buster Patriarch. Even if the Grand Supreme and Hongjun were to fight and the deities wanted to go easy on the monkey, there was still a rule. Great Emperor Jianghu could not beat the monkey. Great Emperor Jianghu's face therefore, the monkey only dared to act impudently at the Southern Heavenly Gate. After all, although the Southern Heavenly Gate had many guardians, the strongest was still the Grand Supreme Elder. The journey to the west was a trap, and the Grand Supreme Elder's attitude towards the monkey had always been ambiguous. It was normal for him to turn a blind eye to it. As for the other guardians, regardless of whether the guardians of the Southern Heavenly Gate were the 4 heavenly kings or the mighty miracle god, the monkey still had the ability to break through. Furthermore, after breaking through the Southern Heavenly Gate, the monkey had sneaked all the way and was only intercepted outside the Lingxiao Palace. There was no uproar in heaven at all. Because of the investiture of the gods, there was the investiture of the gods' cataclysm. Countless people who faced the investiture of the gods died on the investiture of the gods' cataclysm, which led to the heavenly court. However, before Hao Yan's celestial court, there was another celestial court in the untainted world, which was established by the East Emperor Tai and Emperor Jun. It was also called the Ancient Celestial Court, the Ancient Demon Court, and the First Celestial Court. At its peak, it regarded the way of heaven as nothing. This also meant that when Emperor Jun and the East Emperor Tai were in charge of the untainted world, Hongjun, Tao Ancestor and the 6 destined sages all had to stand aside. What was more terrifying was that during the Ancient Demon Court, the demon tribe was not the only dominant force. Another force that could compete with the Ancient Demon Court was the 12 Ancestors of Sorcery and the Ancient Sorcerer Tribe, which were formed by Pangu's essence and blood. The 12 Ancestors of Sorcery were the masters of the 12 Great Ways. When they joined forces to set up the 12 Celestial Demons formation, they could condense the real body of Pangu, which had the power to destroy the world. As a result, the demon tribe controlled the sky and the sorcerer tribe controlled the land, which almost divided the untainted world into 2. At that time, the ancient demon court had 10 demon commanders, also known as the 10 demon kings and the 10 demon saints. In addition, there was a demon master Kuanping who almost became one of the 6 destined sages. At the peak of the ancient demon court, any one of them was not inferior to the celestial court later. The sorcerer tribe and the demon tribe were so strong that Hongjun had no choice but to use the power of the way of heaven to start the cultivation tribulation of the great war of the sorcerer tribe and the demon tribe. In addition to his series of calculations, he pushed the demon tribe to the bottom of the untainted world and almost destroyed the sorcerer tribe. If it were not for the protection of Empress Pingxin, who was formed by the primordial spirit of Hutu, who was schemed by Hongjun, the sorcerer tribe would have been completely destroyed. Now, before Lin Yuan could figure out what was going on with the ancient demon court in the Qianwu world, he had encountered generals Heng Ha and Yin Hong, who were listed on the investiture of the gods during the investiture of the gods' tribulation. All kinds of signs were reminding him that the heavenly court of the great desolate world had probably arranged many hidden hands in the Qianwu world, waiting to plot against him. It was hard to say what the background of the Wu family head and his gang, who claimed to be suppressed by Lei Qiusheng, were. But somehow, Lin Yuan felt that this gang had something to do with the celestial court of the untainted world. So who is it? Lin Yuan closed his eyes slightly and quickly calculated in his mind. He went through the existence of the heavenly court god system one by one, but he still couldn't find any clues. At the very least, the information he had at hand couldn't confirm that the other party was related to the heavenly court, let alone analyze who the big boss of the heavenly court behind them was through this information. For the time being, Sanqing and Sanqing's disciples could be ruled out. Lin Yuan really did not believe that sect master Tong Tian would plot against Hongjun, and Taishang Dao ancestor would fall out with him directly. Only the primeval Lord of Heaven would be able to watch from the side. The main reason was that the primeval Lord of Heaven was not an honest person. Yin Shang. Suddenly, a light flashed in Lin Yuan's mind. In the investiture of God's cataclysm, there were not only disciples of the three religions who were on the list of gods. Not to mention generals like Heng and Ha in the mortal world, there were many people in the royal family of Yin Shang who were forcibly sent to the list of gods. To be precise, there were many people in the royal family of Yin Shang who were forcibly sent to the list of gods. To be precise, Ji Chang and GFA did not want to keep these traitors alive. Firstly, their identities would threaten their rule. Secondly, they were officials of Yin Shang who had betrayed DXN. If they were allowed to live and spread the news, it would threaten the ruling position of the Zhou dynasty. Therefore, these traitors were basically killed by Jianghu and the father and son of the Ji family. After they were killed, they simply fabricated a few false images and bragged about them. Then they became the loyal people who were killed by the tyrant. Many people said that changing history started from the Tang dynasty. In fact, it was not. Changing history had always been a bad habit of the Confucian sect. As the founder of the Confucian sect, the Zhou dynasty would certainly not lose this skill. For example, Baigan, who had the heart of 7 orifices, had a glorious and positive image in history. In fact, what Baigan did was really inhumane. Chapter 1167. Baigan was a member of the royal family of the Shang dynasty. When DXN saw Baigan, he had to respectfully call him uncle. When he was young, he did not defeat DE and became a loser in the struggle for imperial power. However, the struggle for imperial power at that time was not as cruel as the struggle between father and son and brothers. Therefore, D did not kill Baigan. Instead, he entrusted Baigan with an important task. Baigan was overjoyed at that time, thinking that he had finally killed DE. Although he was not young anymore, he could still enjoy the supreme imperial power for the rest of his life. Therefore, he assisted DXIN with the heart of being a powerful minister. However, he did not expect that DXIN was even fiercer than his father. He used women and slaves, personally went to the people to experience the hardships, prepare for war, and expand the territory. It could be said that there was nothing wrong in all aspects. However, DXIN broke the class structure and used a large number of talented people who were born as slaves, directly threatening the status of the aristocrats. In addition, he was strict with the law and emphasized that if the emperor violated the law, he would be punished the same as the common people. Not to mention that the punishment could not be imposed on the scholar officials, it was already good enough that he did not add a level to the crime of knowingly breaking the law. Therefore, Baigan did not do it. Not only did he not become a regent, but he also lost his original power. Therefore, when he knew that Shi Qi wanted to rebel, Baigan still flirted with Ji Chang and GFA. When King Zhou went south to expand the territory and left a large number of elite troops to guard the newly acquired territory, Baigan directly launched an attack signal to Jianghu. In addition, DXIN never looked at the identity of those who broke the law. Not to mention the vassals who had disloyal thoughts, even those who did not want to be the emperor had to think about whether they would fall into the hands of DXIN if they broke the law. In the Shang dynasty, the emperor was respected and not the king. Compared to the so-called king of Zhou, the emperor of the Shang dynasty could really kill and seize. Therefore, the image of a licentious and tyrannical tyrant appeared vividly on the paper. All the warlords returned to their armies and went straight to Chaoga. They had to rely on a bunch of traitors to barely annihilate Yinshang. After that, they went all the way and killed most of the traitors of Yinshang. Therefore, a series of names such as Baigan, Yinhong, and Yinjiao appeared on the investiture of the gods. It could be considered as an early example of, once the cunning hare is killed, the hound is cooked. The reputation of these traitors was as good as it could be. They were better than the traitors who wanted to seize the power of the Shang dynasty and even betray the country. They ate the salary given by DXAN and were loyal to the father and son of the Ji family. They were even given the title of Eternal Loyal Minister. It was even more ridiculous to say that he was licentious and tyrannical. King Zhou only had 3 sons in his life, which were Yinhong, Yinjiao, and Wuging. Ji Chang claimed to have hundreds of sons. Just in Lin Yuan's previous life, there were as many as 17 of them who could testify. Therefore, sometimes one really could not be too serious. When he thought of this, Lin Yuan clearly felt that the light in his mind became clearer. This kind of style that was passable on the surface but liked to play dirty tricks in the dark. Moreover, he could drive Yinhong to the northern frontier. He was afraid that it was really a literati star who did it. At the same time, Baigan, whose god name was called by Lin Yuan, suddenly shivered and looked in the direction of the northern frontier, dumbfounded. Is there something wrong with this Black Jiao's brain? I didn't even show my face and you still think that I was the one who ordered Yin Hong to go to the northern frontier to cause trouble for you? Although Bai Gan was a literati star, he had never been very popular. After all, the Zhou dynasty was chaotic to begin with. After GFA's death, there was a rebellion among the three eunuchs. After that, the various lords fought and killed each other, and the people fought until their brains were fried. The Spring and Autumn Warring States period was an era where hundreds of schools of thought contended. Although there were hundreds of schools of thought contending in the Spring and Autumn Warring States period, Confucianism was never the orthodox school of thought. The three schools of thought were the main schools of thought in the Spring and Autumn Warring States period. In that kind of chaotic era, people did not ask for a literati star, who was talented in literature to descend to the mortal world. They wanted an all-rounder who could kill enemies on horseback and pacify the country when they dismounted. Liu Bang, who took over the foundation of the Qin dynasty, was known as the ancestor of Confucianism. He was very good at asking others to be saints and playing with double standards. However, he was also a ruthless person who ruled the world with law. Even when he was in decline, he supplemented it with Elder Huang's teachings. Worshipping gods was not popular in the Han dynasty at all. Later on, Emperor Wu of Han dismissed hundreds of schools of thought and only respected Confucianism. However, he was also a scholar with the skin of Confucianism and the bones of Confucianism. Even Liu Che used the teachings of the school of war more than the teachings of Confucianism. In fact, if Confucianism had not proposed the concept of great unification, Emperor Wu of Han would not have cared about this group of hypocrites. During the Spring and Autumn Warring States period, there were countless lords and lords everywhere. Every school of thought could make the country strong and rich. Only Confucianism could be said to be, whoever used it will die. It was only during the Tang dynasty and the Song dynasty that Confucianism became popular, especially during the Song dynasty. Even if one had the title of Xiaocai, one would not kneel to an official. This made some gods who were in charge of literary talent very popular. It was also at that time that Bai Gan's incense flourished. However, it was also thrown aside after a few years. Among the gods of the heavenly court, Bai Gan could be said to be at the bottom. If it was not for his quick thinking, he really would not be able to command the 5-grain star sovereign Yin Hong of the fighting division. This time their group lost Yu Jiang and injured Yin Hong. Even DXIN's fist that contained the will of the human king smashed into the northern frontier. It would definitely not be able to recover in a short time. At this time, if he was caught by Lin Yuan, even if he did not die, he would lose a layer of skin. What a pity. Bai Gan gently smacked his lips twice. His gaze was as gloomy as water. He murmured, although Hamba has been in seclusion for many years, I did not expect his mind to be so clear. You saw through my plan and did not want to be my knife. How can I continue to let you live? As his voice fell, Bai Gan had already turned into a ray of light and escaped towards his cave residence. A moment later, a blood-winged black mosquito fell out of the void. Its breath was almost dispirited to the extreme, as if a gust of wind could directly blow it to death. However, Mosquito Doran's gaze was very calm. It swept across the direction that Bai Gan escaped in, and a thoughtful look flashed in his eyes. He had already escaped from Lin Yuan's control for 3 days, but he still could not think of a way to go. After all, he came here on Hongjuan's orders. If he could not complete the mission, even with the protection of the Taishang Dao ancestor, Hongjun could make him suffer a fate worse than death. However, against that extremely strange Black Jiao, he felt that he really did not have much chance of winning. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.